call the regular May meeting of the Verona Zoning Board of Adjustment to order at 7:31 p.m. on May 8, 2025. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please read the notice of this meeting and call the roll?
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied with respect to this meeting of the Township of Verona Zoning Board of Adjustment. Sorry. Which is being held. You may have to do that.
In the book? Okay.
Which is being held.
That one?
Yes.
Okay, the notice requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act have been satisfied with respect to this meeting of the Township of Verona Zoning Board of Adjustment, which is being held in person in the ballroom of the Verona Community Center, located at 880 Bloomfield Avenue, Verona. The time and date of this meeting were included in the annual meeting notice posted in the Community Center and sent to the official newspapers of the Township, the Verona Cedar Grove Times and the Star Ledger, at least 48 hours preceding the start time of this meeting. The agenda and instructions on how to comment will be provided at the appropriate time. All meetings are recorded. Those wishing to speak during any public comment period should only provide their name and municipality. Street addresses are not required. Please be advised that should a member of the public choose to state their street address, it will not be redacted from this recording.
Mr. Tully.
Here.
Dr. Reese.
Here.
Dr. Cortez.
Here.
Mr. Ryan.
Here.
Mrs. Milford Braddox.
Here.
Mr. Mathewson.
Here.
Mrs. DiBartolo.
Here.
Vice Chair West.
Here.
Chair McGinley.
Here.
Board Attorney Ms. Sarah.
Here.
Engineer Ms. Tanweer.
Here.
I'm glad to see, since the council came up with the attendance requirements, everyone showed up at the meeting. That's why, right? Oh, all right, we'll give it a shot.
Did they even know that?
Let's start with some general information. This board deals with the issuance of variances from the Verona zoning ordinance. That ordinance establishes specific requirements for the land area in the township and regulates not only the uses permitted, but the size of the lots, setbacks required, parking, signs, conditional uses, and numerous other regulations. An applicant is never entitled to a variance. Applicants must meet specific criteria contained in the state municipal land use law by satisfying certain legal standards of proof. The burden is on the applicants to show that they should be granted the specific relief requested. Depending on the type of variance requested, applicants will need to prove special reasons, undue hardship, a balance of benefits, and other criteria. These are legal proceedings. Public meeting notices have been published, neighbors have been notified, applicants and their representatives will provide sworn testimony and be subject to cross-examination. Any action this board takes at this meeting will be memorialized in a resolution document prepared by our legal counsel that will be reviewed and adopted typically at our next regular meeting. At that time, any variances granted will become effective. That said, we are a board that conducts its business in a fairly informal manner. Applicants are sworn in, tell us what they want to do with their property, and what they are asking the board to do. Board members will question witnesses, and then members of the public may question those witnesses. At the conclusion of the testimony, members of the public may make a statement regarding the application. After closing the public portion of the application, the board will deliberate and render a decision. If you're following on our agenda, that moves us down to item E, and for the record, we will not have the minutes of our April 10th meeting until our June 10th meeting for approval, as will the resolutions appropriate accompanying that meeting activity. So that moves us through items E and F. which moves us right away to item G, new business. And the first matter on our calendar tonight is application 2024-24, 52 Derwent Avenue. If you would be so kind as to come to the front, remain standing, council will swear, you can see, council is going to swear you in.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
David Bacon, 52 Derwent Ave.
And can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, please be seated. Mr. Bacon? Okay, if you'd be so kind as to tell us what you're doing and what we need to do to help you?
Sure, I'm looking to install a generator, so I'm looking for a variance approval.
Okay, we're going to keep it simple.
Yeah.
All right, and the reason you can't have a generator right now is where do you wish to put it?
On the side of my unit.
On your house.
Yeah, so it's near my neighbor's driveway.
Okay, so you need apparently two variances, because according to our code, no generator shall be permitted within a side yard. And the side yard that you've chosen, it has to be a minimum 8 feet setback, and you are proposed 2.5 feet from the property line.
Yes.
Okay. Now, first question I have is, I looked at the photos, and I noticed that you have some windows right there, and the generator requires you to be 5 feet from a window. And I also noticed that you have a couple of mini splits on the side of that house, and mechanical equipment in the side yard setback, which it appears it is, would also indicate that did you get a permit for the mini splits?
You know, I needed them. They're air conditioning units.
Okay.
They installed them.
For the record, and for everybody watching, you need a permit for just about anything. If you put a doghouse up, it's a construction that requires a permit.
Well, they did I just built the house and they did the HVAC things, they saw it, so I assumed it was covered under that permit.
Assume who saw it.
The whole house was just built, and they just did
Okay.
brand new construction, and they approved it there, so I assumed, why would it be different?
Okay, so it was approved,
I got it, whatever it is, HVAC permit.
right, it was approved as part of the
Oh, yeah.
original?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I didn't just add it, at least I just got in the house and built it, and they put it on, so whoever did the air conditioning approval or whatever it is, they saw it, and they approved it.
They missed it. They missed the variance. Okay. Why the side yard?
Because that's where the power is right there, the gas line. So that's where the contractor says the best spot to do it.
Okay.
And I can't put in the back because the back floods, and that's what I'm trying to need a generator for.
Okay. Other questions of the applicant?
Will you be able to comply with the generator not being within 5 feet of a window?
Yeah, the contractor said it's fine where he's pushing out, will be within that range. He checked all that.
Have you spoken to your neighbors about this?
Yeah, I spoke to the neighbors, they sent the letters out to everybody, and there's one neighbor who it's next to it, but does not care at all. He's actually looking to use it if there's power outage.
Do you know what do you have a generator picked out?
Generac?
Do you know how often it has to run to be tested is it a weekly basis, every
Does
2
that
weeks?
like self-test? I think they said it's like every couple days, so, but it's all like automatic.
Would you testify that you're willing to set the test to be somewhere during daytime hours, called anywhere between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.?
Is the unit sized to run all the electric in the house or just the sub pumps?
All the electric.
Are you gonna have to remove any trees or bushes or anything to put this in?
It's actually the spot where the old AC unit used to be before they moved it onto the side of the house.
I'm just looking at one of the pictures you submitted, and it's like, it looks like a, so it's still gonna be on the side with the AC units, correct? A
A little bit in front of it, actually.
little bit in front of it, okay. So it's gonna be between the tree and the AC unit that I'm looking at? I don't,
Yeah, there's space behind that tree. You can see the footing on the ground there. It goes right there.
all right, that's a slab, so the footing is in there, basically? Okay,
That's where the old AC unit used to be, right on there. There's actually quite a little distance between that tree and that first.
when you say the old AC units, I'm a little bit confused, because you said this is new construction?
The house is, yeah. Well, the foundation was there, but I gutted the.
Oh, okay, so there was a house there, you took it down to the foundation, and you just built a new one? Gotcha, okay.
So the old unit used to be kind of where that tree, right behind where that tree was.
Okay, no, that cleared it up for me, because when you said new construction, I didn't realize that it replaced something else that was there.
Any other board members have questions for this witness?
Did you have flooding incidents, or or was there somebody, the person you bought the house from? Okay, did they have problems before, do you know, with flooding? I know DeWent is a problematic street.
Yeah, since I bought the house, my basement's flooded 3 times. I probably spent $200,000 in my basement, so I'm trying to keep my sump pumps on.
Well, but that's important for me to know.
Right.
Okay, that is, you've had a lot of problems before.
Yes, and now we've redone the whole basement. I put extra sump pumps, and even my insurance said, they're probably going to force me to have this to make sure those sump pumps stay running.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if the board has no more questions, is there anyone from the public that has a question of this witness? Seeing none. I think that's probably the extent of testimony, so is there anyone from the public who'd like to make a statement about this application? Again, seeing none, I would close the public portion, open up to board deliberation, and ask to hear some thoughts.
Yeah, I'm in favor of approving this application. I think it's, obviously the applicant has had flooding problems, and certainly understand wanting to have some protection against that. The noise impact is very minimal, as the generator just does the test on usually a weekly basis for a few minutes. As the applicant said, that he would run it during the daytime hours as to not bother anyone. And also the location, that it is probably going to be very difficult to be seen from the street behind the tree and other shrubs that are there. So I have no issues. I would be in favor of approving.
Okay.
The only thing I would add is that all clearances required for the generator, if there's any maintenance clearances, make sure they're within the property line.
Okay. Any thoughts down this end?
Well, I
Any different?
just expressed my thought was regarding whether it was a history of flooding, and gentleman sort of answered my question to that there's,
Okay.
he's had numerous problems with it, and I don't think it would be, since we don't have anybody speaking in opposition that's near there, I think it would be a reasonable accommodation, if I can use that expression, for us to let him put the generator there.
All right. If there's no dissenting opinions, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject, I did not.
We okay to hear this?
I did not, for the record, say that the application had been deemed complete and notice was proper.
Okay.
So it is, and I say it politically.
Hate to-
You never know.
hate to think we went 15 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
Thank you, Christie. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, and if we could have a roll call vote?
Mr. Chairman, could we put a stipulation, though, that he has to follow the construction official's recommendation? Okay.
Right, that should be part of it. Also,
Okay.
the applicant stated that they would do the testing during the day between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., and that they would comply with all clearances being within the property line required. That sound acceptable to the? Okay.
Dr. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes?
Mrs. Murphy Braddock,
Yes.
Mr. Mathewson,
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Vice Chair Weston,
Yes.
Chair McGinley.
Yes. By my count, the motion passed unanimously, and we will draft up the resolution for our next board meeting. It means you can't start the work until the resolution's passed. If somebody else had a complaint with it, legally, they could file a complaint within so many days after it being passed. So I would wait, but good luck with with your project.
So when does that come?
That would be next meeting, June 10th.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
thank you. Have a good evening. Okay. Moves us to item G2, application 2025-03, 257 Pompton Avenue.
Good evening, Board. Brian Aloy, the owner of 257 Pompton Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, the application has been deemed complete. All notice requirements have been met, and the applicant is free to proceed this evening. Mr. Chairman, it should be noted that some of you may know that Mr. Aloya is the township attorney. As he's also a resident of the township, and as a resident of the township, he certainly is invited to appear in front of the board on his own behalf and for an application. The board should not take into account Mr. Aloya's professional duties with the town. The board should look at this application as if it's any other application. He does not have to prove a higher standard because of his role with the town. And by the same token, he should not be given any favors because of his position with the town. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Foremost, thank you for taking the time to hear my application. I would also like to say that I have my little letter here because I'm also suffering from a little laryngitis, so I'll do my best to keep my voice up throughout this hearing. So as I indicated, I'm Brian Aloy. I'm the owner of 257 Pompton Avenue. I'm also an attorney. Currently, my law office is in Bloomfield, where it's been for the past 12 years. My hope is to perform some construction on this property and move my law office to Verona. I'm going to have two expert witnesses testify today, my architect as well as my engineer. But before I do so, I'm going to testify. Would you like to swear me in?
Yes, please. You raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just briefly about the history of the property. It's my understanding, based upon Resolution 3-86, that the planning board actually approved the usage of this property to be used as a commercial property, very similar to the plans that you have before you that I've submitted. Back in 1986, according to the resolution, it was a residence at that time as well as an office, a dentist office. And the application was to use it as a residence, 2 apartments on the top. maintain the medical office on the bottom, and have a commercial establishment known as the Vac Shack. So the Vac Shack owner, someone might be familiar with the Vac Shack. It was a business in Caldwell on Bloomfield Avenue, and the owner is who I purchased the property from. He was going to move his business to Verona, and for whatever reason, that just never happened. So the commercial use and a very similar plan, pretty much this. He actually had the same parking scheme, I'll call it, that you had before you, with the exception of his plan actually called for, I'll call it the same square type building that I have, with the parking on the Claridge Drive side. But then he also had a 2-car garage built into, I'll call it the square of the building. His building was also designed so it was right up against the 15-foot buffer. You can see we didn't do that. We kept the building distance the same so we would maintain a larger buffer between what I'll call the residential neighbor on Vincent Place. So we have not only the 15-foot buffer, but then there's another, grassy space that that will be maintained, where those plans called it to be right against the property there. So I also like to point out that in my mind, the property is unique. It's unique in its size and it's unique in its location. And the reason I say it's unique in its size and location is because when we drive to the property, we look at the property, one would normally think that it's a property that is surrounded by streets. Because you have Vincent Place, you have what I call Route 23, Pompton Avenue, and then you have Claridge Drive. But Claridge Drive actually is not considered a road. It is a lot. It's a taxable lot. It's basically someone's driveway, but to all of us, particularly with a light out, it appears to be a road. So that's actually a lot next to my property, not a street. So it actually has 2 streets, Vincent Place and 23. So a little bit about me. Again, I'm an attorney. My law firm is 5 attorneys and 1 support staff. So if you look at my plans, you can see we have 6 offices, which is what we currently have now. It is what I guess my architect would probably describe as a non-open office. So it's not like a big work area. You'd have tons of support staffs and cubicles. It's not designed that way. It has your 6 offices and then it has a reception area. And I just point that out because it would be, in my mind anyway, difficult to expand this office to have a greater number of people than I currently have. We could add 1 because there's 1 extra office, and it's purposely designed that way. And then we also have 2 conference rooms. And the design is also in accordance with code because up top we'll have, the proposal is to have 3 apartments, so it's a 50-50 split between the 2, between the residential and the commercial. I guess before I call certainly you can ask me any questions, but before I do so, is the board at all interested in seeing a resolution, the April 1986 resolution? I mean, it's something that you guys would have in your records, but I did bring a copy with me, the resolution of the Planning Board of Verona. It's 3-86. No?
We don't have it.
We don't have that in our packet here, so you just have.
Oh, no, this is something I bought today.
You're going to introduce as an exhibit?
Yeah, I'll introduce it as an exhibit. I would.
A1.
A1?
And just identify it, please.
Sure. A1 is, the top of it is a April 25th, 1986 letter dated, and it's actually addressed to Patrick Hines, the construction official of Verona. And then attached to it is a a 5-page resolution of the board, and again, that's resolution 3-86.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that resolution was not perfected. I think that's what we had determined on that, because that even has where,
When you say perfected, they didn't build the property?
sorry, I didn't hear you.
When you say perfected, you mean it was not acted upon by the applicant?
It was not acted upon
That's correct.
by the applicant.
And that's why I'm here today. If it hadn't been acted upon, I'd probably be happy with the building he designed. We're good. Are there any questions to me before I call my architect, who will just go over the design of the building? And of course, my engineer will go over the site plan and work, probably the meat and potatoes of the application.
So you said, how many people work at your law firm currently?
5 attorneys, 1 support staff, a total of 6.
Okay.
2 of those attorneys actually work remote, never come into the office.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Lawyer. I did go over and just take a walk around the property, and there are a lot of trees that have been removed on the Claridge, I'll call it on the Claridge Road side. I just wondered, were they removed before you bought the property?
Yes, it appears as though they were removed, I'll call it significantly, not like 100 years ago, but I've noticed the stumps also. If you look, there's lots of wood piled up.
Okay, I guess why I'm asking that question, obviously our tree ordinances have changed a lot since I'm sure these trees were taken down, but both our engineer and our environmental commission, I'm sure if you read their reports, both were looking for I believe a plan for how you were going to remediate the tree situation on the lot.
Sure, so my engineer will go over the trees that currently exist.
Okay,
And
your engineer.
he's
Okay.
certainly measured the trees, and we think that our plan is in accordance with the ordinance. But I would also suggest that I'm happy with a conditional approval to work with the township, because my understanding as I sit here today, because I've had conversations with the zoning department, that the township forester will go out and measure the trees and confirm and also look at the condition.
You see where I'm going with this. I mean, I read
100%.
both of those reports, and they both were very specific about having somebody look at them, but you're telling us you'd be willing to accept their recommendations?
I actually requested it,
Okay.
that someone come out that's from the town to look at it. It just hasn't happened yet. So yes, 100%. And I also will go along with I believe it was the burning bush that they did not like. It's not native when I say they didn't like it. It's not something that we want planted in Verona. I'm more than happy to go over all of the end plans and work with them. Big fan of the trees, willing to plant whatever bushes, and work together to make it look nice. I mean, this is not only do I live in town, but now I work for the town, and this is going to be my building, so I certainly want it
And you
to
understand
be
what
as
we
pretty
get
as
on the
possible.
record, obviously. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I saw on the plans you also have some conference rooms, I think 1 or 2.
2 conference rooms, that's
large.
correct.
So I'm guessing you also host some, either your clients, other attorneys, in your current space, is that correct?
So we have a conference room in our current space. Very rarely do we have 2 people. So our office is not like a walk-in office. In my, I think, 12 years there, I don't think I've ever had anyone walk in. But that's also probably because of the building we're in. We're in 2 Broad Street. I don't know if you're familiar with the building, but it's the 7-story building on Bloomfield and Broad. I don't anticipate, just by the nature of our business, that we'll ever get walk-ins. But this way, if 2 of us wanted to meet somebody at the same time, it would just be easier. And there was the room when I met with my architect. He said, yeah, we can make a big conference room and kind of like a smaller offset of that.
Okay. So let's say in the past 6 months or so, what is the maximum number of people you have had at one time in your office, your current office?
So that would probably be, we did a will. So 2 people came in, and then we had 7 people in the office at once.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I don't know if this is a question for the architect, but could you explain a little bit about what's going to be happening in the basement? I didn't see that label on the plan. Like, what's going to be the use in the basement? Is it going to be like set aside for the residential apartments, or is it going to be like for the law office?
Yeah, so the basement, there's 2 accesses to it, but the law office is the only one who can access it from the interior. There is an exterior access, so the plan right now is for the law firm to use that as storage. But there is a possibility, like, I don't know, if someone had a bike or something, we would cordon off a little spot for the residential. But they have that, again, there's an side. If you look at the Claridge side, which is currently there now, there's a door access to get into the basement. And that's currently the only access because the interior basement steps were removed by the prior owner. So we're replacing those interior basement steps, so the law firm can get down there and use it for file storage.
There's actually a 3-car garage there now, but you're taking that down?
Completely down, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. It's an unusual piece of property.
Yeah. Any other questions before I call the architect?
Doesn't appear to be.
Thank you. I'd like to call the architect, Kurt
Because he's a
Schmidt.
witness, members of the public have an opportunity.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Questions?
Is there anyone from the public who would like to ask a question of this witness on the testimony he's presented? If you would be so kind as to come up to the microphone, again, name and town.
Is this for questions and comments or just?
Just questions.
Okay. I'd like to understand a little bit about what will be. Oh, sure, I'm sorry. Anna Fusaro, Verona. I'd like to understand a little bit about the apartments. Oh,
Sure. Would you say understand? You want me to describe them? So there'll be 3 apartments, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, and 1 bedroom, 1 bath.
okay. So the parking spaces that you'd like to build are 20 parking spaces.
That's correct.
Okay. Explain to me why you need 20?
Actually, the code requires me to have 27. I wish it was less, but that's the most we can fit on the lot.
Okay. No more questions.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to ask a question of this witness?
Samuel John, Verona. Just was wondering what the access would be for the parking spaces. Is it from Vincent Place or is it from
It's from
Pompton Avenue?
Pompton Avenue, that's correct.
Okay,
There's no access from the main parking to Vincent Place.
okay. And then the garage that's being taken down, is there going to be a buffer, trees or?
Yeah, so the code requires a 15-foot buffer,
Okay.
which will replace what I'll call a big section of the garage.
Okay,
And then after that 15-foot buffer coming toward the building, there's still even a greater buffer, which will be like a grassy area or whatever.
Okay.
So the building does not go right up against the 15-foot buffer. But yes,
Okay.
it requires a dense buffer, which is shown on the plans.
okay. Just so you're aware, there's been a water issue on that Vincent Place?
We're going to cover that in detail.
Okay. As one of the people that live on that street, I've noticed it quite a bit.
I've actually seen it myself.
Okay. Just wanted to bring that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing that? Move back to you, Counselor.
Perfect. I'd like to call my architect, Kurt Schmidt.
Mr. Schmidt?
Just point of information. This is a D3 variance. Typically, with a D variance, you would have a planner. He's going to be your planner?
That's correct.
Good. Wanted to make sure you had a full staff before we got too far into this.
Great, thank you.
There goes 9 o'clock.
Mr. Schmidt, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. State your name and business address for the record, please.
My name is Kurt Schmidt. Address is 7 Shawnee Trail, Denville, New Jersey. I'm a licensed New Jersey architect since 1985. My license is current and in good standing. I have a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the Jersey School of Architecture at NJIT from 1981. I prepared the drawing. Let me just one more thing. I've been an expert witness before various boards, including this one, a number of years ago, a few times, but it's been a while. And other towns in Essex County that include Montclair, Glen Ridge, Belleville, and West Caldwell.
Sure. Any problem with accepting Mr. Schmidt as a professional architect?
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, your license is current?
Yes, it's current and in good standing.
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, could you briefly review the project with the board so they understand what I'm proposing to build?
Sure. I don't have an existing conditions plan here, but just to make it quick, what is there now is that Mr. Alloy had stated the first floor, this is basically a 1.5-story building. The first floor currently has 2 apartments on, and the second floor has 1 apartment on it. First floor has 2 one-bedrooms, and the second floor has a 3-bedroom apartment. And the basement was used as storage by the former owner of the property. We are going to be putting an addition, or 3 additions on this property, on this building. The first one will be towards the Pompton Avenue side here, and it's going to encompass this area here. We're kind of squaring off the building. This will extend and put a smaller conference room here. We're extending there. It's going to be the waiting area, administrative area, and a common entrance for the residents as well as for the business use. The business use is going to be all by one tenant, Mr. Alloy and his firm. Other additions in the back here of this office complex, or this office suite, we're putting an addition in this upper corner here, which it will have a partner's office, another associate's office, and some secondary spaces, and an addition in this bottom corner here, which will be another partner's office. The building currently has kind of a T shape. We're going to, if you can just squint a little, you'll see that we're squaring it off. The upper floor is being removed completely because it's a low-pitched half-story by definition. It wouldn't support any kind of new construction, so we're taking it off. From there, we're going to put an entire new second floor on this building here, above the first floor, which have 3 apartments. There will be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath here, a 1-bedroom, 1-bath here, and a 2-bedroom, 2-bath here, a total of 3 apartments. All access from a common corridor leading down to the common entry that's shared by everyone. In the lower left-hand, by the way, I should mention, these drawings are the same ones you have before you, dated March 7th, the revision date of March 7th. Just wanted to clarify that. And would you like these marked as an exhibit, or since you have them, you don't need it, right? The lower left-hand corner of the plan shows the basement, and the additions at the basement level are really, with the exception of one tiny space here, are all crawl spaces. So we're not adding basement square footage, other than this small area to accommodate the new stairway that's going on, which is about 50 or so, 50, 55 square feet. There are crawl spaces here now that we're just going to leave as crawl spaces. So the actual basement area is this part that you see right here. And we're really leaving that the way it is. The shaded walls are the new construction. The non-shaded walls are existing. This is just a roof plan. The bulk of the roof is going to be flat. We show these symbols here, which is a sloped gables, and they're over each one of the 3 living room spaces of each of the apartments. I'm going to turn this over now to the elevations. This is the Pompton Avenue elevation here. Again, this is the first floor down. We're adding this up here. This is a corner that's being filled in across the front. This elevation here is the side that faces the Claridge Drive. An addition here. And this over here is the side that faces Vincent Place. And this is what I guess what you call the rear. So the bulk of these roofs are flat. These 3 gable locations here are just at the living rooms. The finishes of this building are going to probably be an EIFS system, a synthetic stucco. Everything that you see is these stippled dotty areas. And the vertical siding will be some kind of a wood product to give it a different texture and a different look. And then in between, we'll see these larger space, I think that's a board and batten siding. So the upper part of the building, for the most part, will be kind of a wood look, and the bottom part will be an EIFS look. The roofs will be what some people call a standing seam or a batten roof. They'll be metal roofs, and they will be just on those areas as I mentioned. Windows at the office level will be a more office look. They'll probably be a dark color, perhaps black. And the windows above will be something that will match in with the the siding, something in a probably a brown or bronze color. The intention of this building is to have it somewhere in the earth tones, tans and grays and things of that nature, nothing loud. That's a basic information. If there's any more detail that anyone would like, I would be more than happy to answer those questions.
Okay, I see on the, for the residential, you have individual package units for each one of the spaces. And I see 3 conditioners up on the roof. Are those the compressors for those?
Those are the condensers, yes.
So how is the law office being conditioned?
We'll probably have, right now we're thinking probably have 2 units in the basement.
So it'll come from the basement, nothing will be on the site?
We will probably have to have the condensers somewhere on the site.
All right, do we know where those are going to be located? Because I don't see them on, I guess I missed them on the plan.
No, I don't believe we have them shown on the site yet. Now, we'll put them wherever their ordinance allows us to put them. We were thinking maybe not next to Vincent Place, but perhaps towards the Claridge side, since that's just the right of way. We're still working on that.
Okay.
But the bulk of the units will be either inside or up on the roof.
Can you say, can you tell me what the occupant load of the offices is?
I don't really have that whole code. Well, there's different ways to look at it. You can look at code based on the zoning ordinance, and then there's the occupant load based on the building code. I believe the business load can be as much as 23, but the actual would be no more than 15.
And that's per the building code, not the zoning code?
That's the building code.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the zoning ordinance is.
Okay.
I know Mr. Helm, our engineer, has information to that. You may want to ask that question again.
Okay. And can you tell me what the use is, what the exact use classification is of the residential?
It's an R2.
R2, okay. And 1 exit is permitted?
For 3 apartments, yes. Once you get above 3, you're required 2.
Okay. Is there sprinklers in this building?
There will be. The building will be fully sprinkled.
And your handicap lift is up at the front?
I'm sorry?
Your handicap lift is up at the front?
That's correct.
Here?
Are there any other questions from the board for our architect?
I'm just looking at the Boswell report here. I guess in comment 41 under the architectural plans, it just mentioned that since there's 3 apartments and an office building, now how are the refuse going to be handled? You have to get a private contractor, or the town going to be able to pick that up?
You want to answer?
Sure. So the refuge will be, we have a spot in the back that's marked off for the garbage cans to go, but the refuge will be picked up under the code. It'll be brought out to Vincent Place and picked up, which Verona allows.
Will any of the condensers on the roof be able to be seen from the street level?
I think it'd be very difficult. We're talking about condensers that are similar to what you have at your house. They're the lower units, they're about the size of this table, about this height. It'd be very difficult to see them from the ground because they're set in, they're not at the edges.
Are they any noisier than a typical residential?
They're basically are a residential grade.
I have a question. It's regarding the trash as well. Is the trash area, is this gonna be enclosed? Is it proposed to be like an enclosure around the trash area? Or is that a question for the engineer? I can wait. Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Our site engineer
Okay.
answer those questions. I don't want to step on his toes.
We good with questions for the architect? Okay, is there anyone from the public who has a question? You've got the process down now, Mr. Sarah?
Yes, I do, thank you. Need roller skates, so get around. Good evening. Can we see?
State your name again,
Just-
please,
Oh, I'm
just for
sorry.
the purpose of the
I'm sorry.
transfer.
Anna Fusaro, Verona. Can we see what the parking lot area, the exterior will look like?
That's a site question. the
That's for
parking lot.
someone else.
That's for our
Gotcha,
engineer.
okay.
I'm really, just so I'm working with the building, the inside
Understood.
and the
Okay.
exterior.
My question is, just in layman's terms, what part of what you want to do is not currently allowed that you're asking for a variance on?
It would certainly be my opinion that the parking is not up to snuff. They require us to have 27 spots, and we have 20. There's also, this is a C.
Sorry, 27 spots based on what the property currently is, or what you want to do to it?
What this building would require.
Okay, that's not my question. My question is, what you want to do, all of this,
Mm-hmm.
this is all allowed right now, based on the current zoning?
Well, no, it's a
Well, that's
conditional.
what I want to understand.
We can
Because there
summarize
are
what your
apartments there now.
variances
currently.
that you're looking for.
There are apartments currently in that building, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so he wants to do something different. I want to know what is currently not allowed that he's asking.
It's not a very long list,
Okay.
but it is a list.
On the document I received?
On the agenda.
Okay, I don't have an agenda. Is it legalese or is it something I could understand?
It's legalese,
Okay.
more or less. But basically the first one, A, says that they need a use variance because the property is currently slated to be used as something other than office residential.
Okay,
So
so
that's
it's
one of the
not
things-
office residential right now, it's just apartment residential, and he wants to make it, I'm sorry, sir, would like to make it office and residential.
Right.
Got it.
So that's
Okay.
one of the things. The parking that's required for this, we have codes that say how many spaces go for each apartment, square foot of office. We'll go through that whole thing with the engineer. They need to come up with 27 spaces. They only have 20 on the plan.
But 27 spaces for what he wants to change it into. And
right.
currently, the number of parking spots are how many?
It's undefined.
Good question.
It's an odd lot, so you could
So how
line
many
them
cars
up in the
could fit?
driveway.
Maybe 5, 6, 7?
Oh, no, you could probably fit, if I had to guess. It's a 3-car garage. You have 3 in the garage. The driveway is in place. Again, these are guesses. I'm going to say you could probably handle 5 to 6 in there.
Okay, so,
Can I quote the engineer's report, Your Honor? It says here, this is one of the variances that we'll be looking at. It says the parking stall count, that's I think you're asking about.
right. So
For the
there's,
current code, the required parking space count would be calculated at 27.
That's for what
but for what
Yeah.
he wants to do, but
She wants to know how many cars I can park on the lot now, I believe.
Yeah.
The applicant, you're proposing 20 spaces.
That's correct, but I think the question is how many cars can I park on the lot? Currently, at the current condition, my guess is somewhere around 12, 13.
Okay. So 12 is okay, is allowed now, correct? The location he's in?
For what's there, it would be grandfathered in?
Okay, so the only reason that you're making 20 is because you want to change the zoning or?
Because of the size of the building and the number of apartments. That's what dictates how many parking stalls you need.
Okay, so he needs another variance. I'm sorry?
There's additional use being added to the building, there's another apartment and there's a commercial space.
Got
So
it,
that requires more
okay.
structure.
So that's another variance. Where is that on
That would be
this
B.
agenda? That's B?
All right. Oh, wait. I'm sorry,
B
that's
is the
C.
generator.
That's C. Next one.
On the front and two.
Is there a back to there?
Okay,
That's C. B, they also need, because their plans call for 20-foot stalls, 20-foot deep stalls, 9-foot wide, and they are proposing to have them 18 feet long as opposed to 20.
okay. So a lot of these variances are because of the parking, it seems to me.
Two of them at least.
Okay,
The third one, because the parking is proposed within 50 feet of the rear property line, they require a variance. It should be 50 feet away from the rear property line, according to code.
okay. And number 2 is about the professional office that's going in. That's a variance. That's a.
Can I
Yeah.
interject on that?
Yeah.
The mix that is being proposed
Mhm.
is permitted as a conditional use.
What does that mean?
Okay, there's a difference between a conditional use and a use that is permitted per se. Okay? The conditional use says that,
I think that would help.
please don't shout out.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, I was still speaking.
Okay.
The professional office, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Give me a
so-
second.
So the conditional use versus a outright.
To the conditional use, this combination of uses is permitted
Okay.
under our code, provided that there are none of these other bulk issues
Oh,
that have arisen. So the applicant has no burden to prove that this is a good mix and match.
okay,
That essentially has been decided by the ordinance,
okay.
okay?
I understand.
Okay, but because he has a mix and match and fails to meet some other criteria, what the board is deciding is these other variances that were decided, hey, does this 6 parking spot variation or 7 parking spot variation, is that material? So the board is not really evaluating whether to mix the professional and the commercial. Okay, it's just, is that okay with limited parking or with what some might say is limited parking, some might say is sufficient parking? Is that okay with a side yard being violated? It's supposed to have 50 feet and he might be proposing 30.
So if there were no other variances required, then the mixed use, if that's the term, would just be fine.
Is permitted in this zone, yes.
And so the parking spaces is primarily that additional variance requirement?
Exactly.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Anthony Gardner, Verona. How are you? So just a question about, you mentioned the maximum occupancy load earlier. Does that include, so I think you said 23 people or something like no more than 15. Does that also include the number of tenants in the apartments?
No,
Doesn't?
no, it doesn't.
So what's the maximum load there? And then how are you going to enforce and make sure that, there's not 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment?
Well, I don't know how anyone could enforce something like that. As far as the number of tenants in the apartment, that's a difficult thing to answer. I don't have all that information with me. If your question is gearing towards parking required as per the occupancy load, that's dictated by what's called the residential site plan improvement standards by the state. And that's the same for every municipality.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a certain number of spaces you need for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, et cetera. And Mr. Held will probably be able to answer that question, but he gives in his on his drawings, the information required for the residential and what's required for the office space based, I believe it's on the Verona zoning ordinance, correct? And that's what he's trying to make.
But I guess my question is, there must be some assumption within the ordinance that, you know, for a two-bedroom apartment, the maximum amount of people that are going to live in it are, say, 4 people. Because obviously, as you said, it could lead to a further issue around the parking, because then if you don't have enough space to accommodate within the property, where are those people going to park?
Again, that issue can be raised with any residential project, it can be raised with a single-family home. The ordinance requires so many parking spaces for a single-family home. Single-family homes could have a lot more than just 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, they have 4 or 5. I'm not sure what the requirement is for parking for that, but you can get a lot more people in there than what you think. You have to base it on the requirements that are set by the ordinance and by the site, state site requirements.
Okay.
I mean, you can always jam more people in any facility, that's true, but that's not something that can be really a part of this discussion, because it can't be enforced by ordinance, by this board.
I guess that's where I'm confused. How does a property owner who is operating a business, who is renting to tenants, not be able to enforce how many people he's renting to?
I think, if I may interject, I think that it comes down to the fire code and the fire inspector.
Thank you.
Right,
So there's a maximum occupancy from a fire perspective of
Yeah,
how
I mean,
many
if you
people
see
could live
10
in those
people
apartments.
camping out in 1 bedroom, then call the fire marshal and
Yeah.
they'll be able to.
Because I think that
do
honestly
something.
was potentially an issue that has occurred in that house in the past, where it's been rented out numerous times to multiple people. And it always seemed like, you know, how many people live in that house? Because you'd see all these different cars and all these different people. So I guess that, you know, especially now since you're proposing adding, you know, additional rental spaces within it, you could understand why that would be a concern.
You would also control that through the lease?
Right. So you have a mechanism.
There's
to
a
say-
mechanisms to control, and I can tell you that as long as I live there, it's not live there, but work there, and right, it's not, you know, if approved and if the project gets all the approvals it needs, because it also needs state approvals and whatnot. It's a very expensive project. You're not going to find 400 people living in those apartments.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board for our architect? Are there any other questions from the public for our architect? Seeing none?
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the engineer and planner, James Held.
Mr. Held, your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, James Michael Held, H-E-L-D, resident in Woodland Park, New Jersey.
And can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Can you briefly describe your background in education to the board?
Yes, certainly. It's a pleasure, first of all, before this board again. Many, many years I've worked in Verona. I was a municipal engineer for 35 years within Verona. Before that, I was 10 years, I was the assistant engineer, municipal engineer in Milburn Township. I hold a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Newark College of Engineering. I hold a master's degree in public works administration from the University of Pittsburgh, and I also hold a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of Pittsburgh as well. And I'm also a certified municipal engineer as well. And I've been practicing since 1972 in that capacity. I also have a license as a licensed land surveyor in the state of New Jersey, a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, besides being a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey.
I'd like to offer Mr. Held as an expert, both as an engineer and planner.
Well, all 3 licenses are current and in good standing?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, you had me at NJIT. We're good.
Thank you, Mr. Held. Can you?
Yeah, you want to mark these? These are the addresses that we need to mark as exhibits.
Sure.
The plans we brought this evening are dated April 20th. It's the same plans I think the board has, but I think Mr. Messere had asked us to bring those and to mark it as an exhibit this evening. so that you would have the latest copies on the record for the board.
Because they were revised from the original submission, correct?
Correct.
Right. So if you could just read the title block, and then we'll label them A2, starting with A2.
Yeah, there's 6 sheets, and I'll read those 6 sheets. They're all dated April 20th is the latest date. The first sheet is the zoning and area plan. That is sheet 1 of 6. The site plan is identified as sheet 2 of 6. The tree removal and mitigation plan is dated April 20th. It's April 20th of 25. It's sheet 3 of 6. The soil erosion and sediment control plan, also dated April 20th, is sheet 4 of 6. And the soil erosion and sediment control plan bio basin detail is sheet 5 of 6. And the last sheet is the lighting and EV charging station plan dated April 20th, and that's sheet 6 of 6.
Mr. Chairman, just for my own clarification, the comments that were submitted by the engineering and the environmental commission was probably one up before the two plans were submitted. Am I accurate in that?
According to the letter from Boswell, their May 1st review deals with engineering plans, last revised March 1st.
The plans that you have in your folders today were the ones that I believe had the revised date of April 20th or April 30th. So those just came into the office this week. So any of the reviews that you have were based on the original submission.
Thank you. You answered my question, but it also is a little bit confusing from my personal perspective when you go through comments that are based upon a plan that we do not have until tonight. I mean, I'm being a little picky here, but I just want to make sure that, for example, they keep mentioning the tree mitigation plan. Well, now it's here. Okay, sorry. We'll plow through. Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, the tree mitigation plan was always part. There were some revisions based upon Mr. Boswell's letter, but we only revised what was in his letter.
Okay, so the plans we just got tonight address some of the issues
That's correct.
that were raised
100%.
in the initial comments.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Hupp, would you like to walk through the...
Yeah, certainly. We'll start with the first sheet, and we can focus on the uniqueness of this property. Property is located on the easterly side of Pompton Avenue, and it also has a panhandle that abuts the residential component as well as the Claridge Drive. This property was serviced for many years as part of the development when Vincent Place was first developed many years ago. In addition to that, I know Boswell Engineering asked a comment as to the plan does depict a 20-foot right-of-way that traverses the property along the northerly side of the property and certainly along the panhandle, so to speak. This served as the access for the township many years ago before Claridge Drive was built, as access to the Claridge water tank that's on top of the hill adjacent to Claridge 1. So this was the area that the township reserved. There's 20 foot on the property side of the owner, as well as 20 feet on the Claridge Drive side. So there was a 40-foot right-of-way that provided access and also allowed for the underground utilities to provide water to the tank that's located on top of the hill. So that still remained. It was never vacated. It still exists on the property. Title still reflects that. And there's no intention, certainly by the municipality or by the owner, to vacate that as part of any improvement. and it certainly doesn't interfere with any development of this property and has not caused any problems from the standpoint of servicing this property. So that you can see on the plan. You'll see I did the original survey on this property last November, where I identified the existing structures on the property as the architect has already indicated. It's a 1.5-story building. There's a block garage that services the property. There's 3 access driveways to this property, 2 off of Pompton Avenue, 1 off of Vincent Place. Servicing this property was never a defined parking areas on this property from the standpoint of striping or certainly from the standpoint of location of where they would be. It was pretty much a hit or miss as to where people parked, and probably in essence there was probably a sufficient parking, 3 within the garage and the remaining 8 or 9 spaces that could be used on the existing macadam surfaces on the property. This property has been a source of irritation from the standpoint for many years, from the standpoint it needed to be updated, and certainly this is the opportunity that does that. Many years ago, I was involved in developing the master plan, servicing as a municipality's engineer on the project, on the properties, and we looked at this property as being very unique from the standpoint that it was an opportunity that there should be commercial development allowed on this property, and certainly from the standpoint allowing for a modification on that to allow a mixed use. And certainly within the master plan, and the most recent master plan that was developed in 2022, there were certain goals and objectives that master plan identified. It really relates to this property in particular. In that master plan, there's a land use element, the goals and objectives of the land use element. Item number 4 clearly states that it's to maintain the character of the established neighborhoods in the residential neighborhoods. Claridge Drive is a access point for the Claridges, and Vincent Place is strictly a 1-family residential component. This property has never been servicing as a 1-family household, and certainly was not the idea of this plan was not to encroach on that from the standpoint of acquiring additional properties along Vincent Place to move the commercial element further to the east. And number 5, as part of the overall objectives, was to promote the growth in areas that meet current and future land use trends. And certainly they considered that as an important consideration that mixed use development would be considered along this property. So from the standpoint of the planning board aspect and the master plan development, this really is consistent with what the master plan had talked about. From the standpoint of what they saw from the standpoint of the development. And as such, the municipality, the governing body, eventually did pass an amendment to the ordinance that would allow a mixed-use development on this property as well as properties along the C2 zone on Pompton Avenue. There was other considerations that the goals and objectives of the master plan considered was they wanted to provide a balanced variety of residential commercial elements in the community. And certainly this was going hand in hand with that. And to guide future development and redevelopment. This is really a redevelopment of this property. From the standpoint, it's going from a mixed use to a mixed use that considers a professional use as part of the application. And one of the other things that was very important in the master plan, they talked about the benefits of environmental considerations, and there is some green infrastructure development that we'll talk about a little bit later in this hearing. From the standpoint, it will guide the development of this property. So the master plan was key. It set the goals and objectives, and within there, the master plan, they had the land use element of the master plan. And what's interesting is the land use element that was adopted by the board, by the governing board, the planning board. It identified it as strictly a residential property, which was a low-density residential use. But when it came to the actual land use of the property, they asked for a modification on that in the master plan that it would go to a commercial C2 zoning district that would allow professional offices and businesses in a district for commercial and professional offices. So this went hand in hand with the modifications to the zoning ordinance that the governing body developed. And as such, they developed conditional use standards. And what Mr. Massera was talking about earlier is that this is a permitted use provided as a conditional use, provided you meet certain standards within that zone. And as part of the governing body's preparation and development of the zoning ordinance, they set certain conditions that if you wanted to have a mixed-use development on this property, there was 4 or 5 elements that you had to consider. Parking was the criteria. You would not be, we would not be before this board, we would be before the planning board if we met all those conditions. We didn't meet all those conditions. We don't have sufficient parking. That was an element of the conditional use standards, and therefore we are expanding the nonconformity from the standpoint that parking is a criteria that was necessary as part of the mixed-use development. And we do meet the other conditions from the standpoint of its requirements within the zoning district. You have to have a certain lot size within a certain zone, which we do. We meet all the other criterias that are necessary to justify the regulations for the mixed use as a residential office retail use within Chapter 158-3 of the zoning ordinance. Paragraph A2, where it says, when residential uses are mixed with retail and office space, the residential unit shall be located on the first floor only, or excuse me, not on the first floor, it should be on the second floor. So that's certainly what the architect has talked about. The residential component of this application is on the second story, and the professional office is on the first floor. 20% of the lot is reserved for open space. We have in excess of 20% is open space particularly because of the undeveloped panhandle portion of this property, and that a dense landscape buffer is provided separating this property from the residential properties on Vincent Place. We do provide that, and as I said, the one thing that is short is that within the ordinance, the access must be off of Pompton Avenue. All right, we do provide that as part of this application, but the one shortfall that drives us why before this board is because there's not sufficient parking. Otherwise, this application will be heard as a permitted use before the planning board. So that's why we're before this body. On our sheet, first sheet, sheet 1 of 6, we show the zoning and area plans, and I have a table that indicates all the compliances with this development. One of the things I want to talk about is that I think there is some confusion as to the standpoint of what a corner lot is and its frontage, as what is considered its frontage, what is considered a rear yard and side yard. The ordinance specifically talks about what this corner lot is. As Mr. Loy has indicated, there's not 3 frontages on this property, there's only 2. Claridge Drive is not a public right-of-way. There's no access to Claridge Drive. We cannot provide driveway access to it, or ingress and egress off of Claridge Drive. It's a separate driveway. Much like anyone's driveway in their homes, it's a separate portion of the properties that for Claridge Drives themselves. This is a corner lot by definition. It has to have sufficient side yard, front yard, and rear yard. At one time, many years ago, when I was the municipal engineer, we identified that a corner lot really had no rear yard. It was always a front yard, side yard, and side yard. But the ordinance clarified that as part of their redevelopment of the ordinance itself. And within that portion of the ordinance, they give you certain pictorial representations as to what corner lots are, and it would refer to the zoning ordinance. And in this, you could see that we're exactly similar to one of the definitions where the frontage on Vincent Place is considered the front yard. So we measure the frontage from the front yard on Vincent Place. Also, the frontage on Pompton Avenue is a front yard. So there's 2 front yards on the property. The side yard is strictly the side yard is the area between the east side of the property and the neighbor on Vincent Place. That is considered the side yard. And the rear yard is the area between the building itself, or the proposed building, and Claridge Drive. So that's the definition as to the ordinance as to what's required. So in essence, the ordinance also goes further to say that you have to meet those setbacks. We do. We meet all those setbacks. The representation that was prepared for the board's analysis considers that there's a variance involved. I don't believe there's a variance. The variance is such that the side yard is a 23-foot side yard, as we talked about. That is not a rear yard. It's not a 50-foot requirement. That's 23-foot. It meets the requirements. The rear yard is the area between the building and Claridge Drive. That is the rear yard. The building itself will have a greater than 50-foot setback. It does allow a 5-foot intrusion into that rear yard area, provided that it provides for stairs, access ways, and in the ordinance that allows for that, it takes that into consideration. So in essence, I don't believe there is a variance necessary for the side yard requirements.
So, Mr. Help, can I stop you there? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Are you saying that because the variance that's, on the agenda that's here is saying it's a rear yard setback that needs to be 50 feet, are you saying that the variance that is needed was assuming that the 50 feet was, I would say, on the east side of the property?
That's not a rear yard. That's a side yard by code.
Okay. So then we're saying the parking lot is going to be 23 feet from the rear property, meaning towards Claridge Drive?
That's a rear yard, okay? There's a requirement of being 50 feet from the structure to the rear yard lot line, and we have greater than 50 feet.
Okay.
So you're challenging one of the requirements here?
Correct.
So you're saying
But it's up to the board to make that interpretation. That's my interpretation based on the ordinance that I reviewed, and...
Okay, and you're saying that you have 50 feet or more than 50 feet from the building to the rear yard line, but the variance that is written and was proposed is saying that it's measuring from the parking lot to the rear property line.
Correct.
Okay, so you're saying the measurement should be to the building and not the parking lot?
I don't believe that's a variance that's required. But again, that's up to the board to make that interpretation.
Point of clarification. Mr. Held, we agree that it's a corner lot because it fronts on two streets. We agree that the ordinance says the rear yard shall be located opposite the narrowest frontage.
Correct.
The narrowest frontage of Pompton and Vincent is Vincent.
Correct.
The rear yard then is opposite Vincent.
Correct.
Okay. Opposite Vincent is Claridge.
Correct.
That's the rear yard.
Correct.
Okay. The minimum rear yard setback should be 50 feet.
Correct.
Okay. The parking lot is proposed to be 23 feet.
No, they're interpreting the area between the building and the property line adjacent to the residential component on Vincent Plate as being a rear yard. It's not a rear yard, it's a side yard.
It's not, we just went through the definitions.
No.
It's defined as,
on the dimension that's shown on the plan, is 23 feet from the structure to the property line to the east. All right? That's a side yard. It's not a rear yard.
Stay with me. Hang on. The rear yard should be located opposite the narrower frontage.
Correct.
Okay. The narrower frontage is Vincent.
Correct.
The rear yard then is Claridge Drive.
Correct.
So our rear yard setback is Claridge Drive to the structure.
Correct. And that's greater than 50 feet.
Isn't the parking lot in that?
That doesn't count towards setback dimensions. You measure off the buildings, not off the parking lots.
Okay, so at least we've identified the same, now it's a question of not semantics, but what is the definition of a setback?
Correct.
Okay.
We
can't have a
setbacks
structure.
for principal uses. A parking lot is an accessory use.
Well, I think our ordinance defines setbacks as with a structure, and a parking lot would be a structure.
No, a parking lot is an accessory use. You measure from an accessory
Anything
use.
that is built in the ground is defined as a structure.
It's from a planning perspective, it's an accessory use. The principal use is a structure. You measure setbacks from the principal use.
Okay. We at least agree on the facts.
Correct.
Right, and then it's an interpretation.
That's exactly right.
Okay, all right.
All right.
For clarifying.
Now, going to the other identification as being a variance necessary is the 20-foot parking stalls. The parking spaces themselves are 20 feet. from the back of the parking space to the curb line is 20 feet. Now, municipality, when I was here, would always allow that to happen because we don't want the curb stops to be placed in parking lots. So we could put a curb stop in and you would have a 20-foot stall, but in essence, we allow a 2-foot overhang. You look at any municipal parking lot in the community, they're all 18-foot stalls because you're measuring from the back of the parking space to the front of it. It allows for a 2-foot overhang. So we do comply from the standpoint that we're provided that. If we need to increase the overall space for the additional 2 feet, the actual parking space will now be 22 feet, all right? Which is not what's intended by ordinance, and certainly not intended to increase the impervious coverage by an additional 2 feet. And then you would also have a maintenance issue of putting curb stops in the parking lot. When I was here, we never allowed curb stops. There are no curb stops in any public parking lots that you see in our community. All right, so they're all, if it's conforming from the standpoint of what the zoning ordinance allows. Otherwise, if they're 20-foot stalls, it would increase the impervious coverage. You would have to put curb stops in such that they would not allow the car to overhang the front of the curb and also increase the impervious coverage. So that's why.
Mr. Hope, can I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're saying? Because you're saying it's a 20-foot stall, but what I'm hearing is it's really an 18-foot stall, but you're saying that if someone pulls into the parking space, the hood of their car will be over grass or whatever, like extending beyond what the asphalt would be.
Correct, correct.
Okay, so you're in agreement it is an 18-foot space. They will just utilize some of the grass area that is beyond the space.
Absolutely. That's always was intended. In any projects that I reviewed as part of municipal engineer, we always allowed that. It was a 20-foot stall with allowed a 2-foot overhang. The parking spaces themselves were measured as 18 feet. Otherwise, you would have to put curb stops in, a maintenance issue. You increase impervious coverage. There's negative aspects of that.
Okay, and nothing calls for the plan to have shrubs or anything right at that edge of the parking?
Correct. It's a flat area behind the curb, so the car would overhang. Once the wheels of the car hit the curb, the front end of the car would overhang in that 2-foot space.
Okay, and in your engineering expertise, do you believe that it provides the drivers to back out of those parking spaces without any kind of fear of hitting the building and, with plenty of room to turn and get back out?
Absolutely. We maintain the requirement of 24-foot setback from the standpoint that the parking spaces, you need a minimum 24 feet. We do maintain 24 feet. So that's clear. It's compliant. We're also talking about the parking schedule. We talked about that we need a variance for the number of parking spaces based on the testimony of the architect and the owner, based on the usage that's anticipated. It's intended that we will comply. There was some question as to why do we have number of spaces for the 1 and 2 bedrooms that are 1.8 units for 1 bedroom and 2 for 2 units. That's all based on state residential site plan standards. So that's compliant. It's not an arbitrary number that was either incorporated as part of the municipality's ordinances. It's a residential site plan standard as to why you need those number of spaces for the residential component. So we do need, from the standpoint, we need 26.6 or 27 spaces. What we clearly identified to do is that we want to comply a residential parking, very much like theirs now, is that the residential component of the parking, part of it would be satisfied by the access driveway and 2 parking stalls off of Vincent Place. It's not intended that would be utilized by the professional staff. That would be, and I believe the owner will agree that he would limit that as part of the lease, that those spaces would be reserved for residential components and not utilized by the professional office. I don't know if board members have any other questions on sheet 1. I'd be happy to entertain that.
I have a question about the parking. So the two parking stalls that you testified would be essentially reserved for residential, that's 19 and 20 on this
I'll
sheet?
go to the next sheet on that.
Oh, okay.
That's correct. 19 and 20 would be designated for residential parking.
And is there any access to the rest of, to the other parts of the parking lot, or?
No, no.
So it's drive in and back out?
Much like
Back in and
much
drive
like
out?
they do now on that driveway. What's interesting about this is that these parking spaces are being brought closer towards Pompton Avenue. You have 15-foot buffer, then you have a sidewalk component, so it's separated further from the residential areas on Vincent Place. So you're picking up another 19 feet in separation between the parking spaces versus what's there now, which is virtually right on the property line.
And is the length of these stalls the same length as the other stalls?
They're the same dimensions as the other remaining parking spaces, the other 18 spaces, except for the handicap space.
And is there that this too would utilize an overhang?
Yes.
Okay. And then the spot that's numbered 18, which is on the other side, is that a residential spot, or that's on the other side that's accessible from the parking lot?
I'm sorry, which space?
Spot 18?
18 is additional space. On the charging station plan, you can see that's where it's intended that we could charge vehicles at that location. It also provides an opportunity, if it's not occupied, that you can use it as a turning point. Obviously, if all the spaces were full, that as well as the handicap space. The handicap space has to be reserved for handicap, but certainly that's an opportunity that could be utilized for turning opportunities. And again, it's also separated 15 feet from the neighbor to the east by the 15-foot buffer that separates between that parking stall and the residential component.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with spot 18 and 14, how would you actually get out of those spots?
Out of which ones?
18 and 14, how would you get out of those spots? Because there's no, it's basically going straight, you have no
Yeah,
means of...
you would back out. I mean, there's a way to do it. I mean, obviously depends on how occupied the other spaces are, but it's intended, the full 24 feet separates the spaces, so there's ample opportunity to turn to get out of those spaces.
And they do back. Are they back, I guess you're talking about space 14, right?
And 18, yeah.
What?
And 18.
And 18, yeah. So are they backing all the way out of the driveway?
No, they would back up into the 24-foot aisle. They would turn, and then they would traverse out onto Pompton Avenue. Much like in any parking lot you visit, Pilgrim Shopping Center, all 24-foot aisles. So you back out of the space, turn, and traverse out to the west towards Pompton Avenue.
Yeah, I just don't think you have to come all the way straight out. So there's enough room to come all the way straight out and make that 90-degree
They would
turn.
come straight out.
I don't think the 24 feet is enough to turn your car, because you're backing up straight.
Especially with today's.
Then all the other spots you can back up a little at.
Right, all the other
at an
spots,
angle.
yeah.
But this one, you're backing up straight, and I don't think you're enough to turn.
Well, you could turn into the spade 18, or 18 can turn into spot 14.
Unless they're occupied.
You know, the really reason is we could have put an access point there, but again, that's the 15-foot buffer that we wanted to maintain, separating this property from the neighbor to the east. So if the board wanted, we could reduce that by 5 feet at that point and extend the parking lot at that point, but then you're intruding on the 15-foot buffer that we anticipated we would provide, a dense landscape buffer.
As the applicant, I'd also just like to say that while you might not get it on your first time, as the board's saying, with the 24 feet, I think you can back up straight, turn, and then maybe you have to back up again and turn again. But I'll call it's going to be a low, you're not at Kin's Shopping Center or whatever. This is not where people behind you beeping or you're going to get nervous. It's a professional office parking lot. So even if all the spots were taken and you happen to be leaving 18, it might take you twice to turn, but you're leaving the lot. So I don't see it as a big deal. I appreciate the engineers. One of the tasks that I gave the engineer was to have as little impervious coverage as possible. Actually, one of the questions was, why 20 spots? I think 20 spots is more than adequate for this. I would prefer to have it down, but I understand the code and I understand the reason why. We don't know how many, ultimately, like the residential stuff, so I understand why the need is there. But I would prefer to have it and have 2 spots that might be a little more difficult to traverse, but they certainly can safely, I believe, with the 24 feet.
I guess I'm just trying to make sense of this. So the entrance for the residents is where?
Well, the residents would also share the larger parking lot.
But the entrance to the residence is
But
where?
but the 2 spaces off of Vincent Place would be reserved for residential only.
The entrance to the residence?
The entrance is the same. It's, I'll call it in the front on Pompton Avenue. The front of the building, everyone enters the same way and there's different doors. Like I'll call it the master door, we all walk into the same thing, and the law office doors here, and the residence doors over here.
So the first offer to the residents is to park at 1920 and then hoof it to that Pompton entrance. Is that?
They would use the front entrance. They would come around the front entrance.
Everybody used the front entrance, so the resident,
Are there going to be other?
Better word, it's not a house, so you're going to have to walk a little bit to get to the front, to your apartments.
Understood. Are there going to be other reserved spots for residents?
No.
Okay. There's a handicap spot, the electric vehicle charging point spot. Is that any intent to reserve it for electric vehicle parking only?
No. That's if there's an electric vehicle, like if one of the tenants has an electric vehicle, a Tesla or something.
Okay.
I want them to be able to charge.
And then will you be talking to that charge point spot at a later point?
Talking about what? I'm sorry.
The utilization of that charge point spot? Like, do you have any kind of knowledge as to how that works at all?
I still don't understand the question.
Like, do you know the utilization of that? Is that something that's posted online? Can somebody look that up and find a charge point spot?
Well, we designed the EV station in accordance with the code, so it's certainly,
Yeah, in terms, can somebody look that up online and say, oh, there's a charge point spot, and then bring their vehicle
I think
in?
charge point is what he used, but this will be owned by me.
it's not intended the public would come on this property and charge their vehicles. It's certainly reserved for only the individuals who would either work on the property or the residential.
Okay. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I know that some of these charge points are listed online.
Yes. I believe there's a company charge point, and I have an electric car, so I go to their stations. This is not meant to be, as the engineer indicated, a public charging, so you won't be able to find it online.
So they won't be able to find it online and utilize it. Perhaps you can address this. Because there are, again, mixed use, residences on top and, law offices on the bottom. Can you explain to me, because of the main entrance being on Pompton, box trucks and deliveries? How does that work in that parking lot? Because there was one thing about like vehicles turning around, but with the presumption of no open spaces, because again, hoping for the best, planning for the worst here, a box truck coming into that location, is that a reasonable lot for a box truck?
Well, we discussed this with the architect and the owner, is that Vincent Place, certainly, Amazon truck would down Vincent Place, they all go down the street. They don't go in the people's driveways, right? They would park adjacent to this property. There's 2 rear doors to the commercial element. So if there's a need to develop something minor for the commercial element, they would use the sidewalk that's been identified, they park in the street, bring it into the property, and certainly a residential component would do the same thing as they do now. They would normally service it from Vincent Place, not park on Pompton Avenue, and bring the item to the front door of the building in Compton Avenue. So I don't anticipate that there's any great need for large commercial trucks frequenting this property, other than a Staples or a Amazon delivery truck or
What if they're moving in and moving out? But if they have it's a moving van, I mean, you're gonna have a transient group of people there, you're gonna have people renting. They could stop on Vincent Place, I guess, carry it all around, but.
Well, at that time, the owner will have to coordinate with the individuals remaining in the building, is that there has to be certain spaces in the parking lot reserved for a moving component.
Yeah, I guess,
And coordinate that accordingly.
I think you're making an assumption that an Amazon truck is gonna see a driveway for that building and understand that there's no turnaround. And they go about 1,000,000 miles an hour, they probably already passed Vincent Place, see the address, pull in. Like, that's where just my consternation with residential dwellings, feeding off of Amazon on a daily basis, and or WB Mason, or where all these other paper supply trucks. Can you talk to the ability for a box truck to go in there and make a delivery and make that maneuver?
Well,
Or is there a necessity to put some sort of sign that
If they on the
says,
property, they have to make a turning to get out. You can't back onto Compton Avenue.
correct, is
Much
there a
like now.
capacity to do that?
Now, the individuals who use that building and those parking lots, they back out onto Compton Avenue. And that's within the requirements of how that building is utilized at this point. They'll have opportunities to turn around based on the number of open spaces that they'll be able to turn around individually on the property, where they would frequent it from Vincent Place.
Is there currently a turnaround there? Is it currently just a,
Horseshoe driveway curve.
and it doesn't necessarily look like an office building? I guess optically, and it looks again fantastic, but optically to a driver, Amazon or otherwise, whatever, I hate to use brand names, but somebody making rapid delivery, as we saw in the building, very well presented, I'm not necessarily getting the sense that they would not think that there's an exit point. And for me, the concern is, what is the plan for them if they pull in to be able to get out without backing up onto Compton, which is not the most conducive? And so, is it maneuverable enough for them to be able to move out, or are we going to get into a situation where potentially we're going to have trucks backing out of that?
I understand your concern. As I said, what was anticipated based on the usage of the building, based on the testimony by the owner and the architect, the opportunities that are happening are going to be very infrequent from the standpoint of usage. That it's mostly minor deliveries from the standpoint of paper products, or picking up lawyers' delivery services, or picked up in vehicles or in vans. They would either come onto the property, park in a space, and exit the property. Or in essence, that there's delivery, predominantly if they're delivering from a larger delivery service such as Amazon or UPS, they would utilize Vincent Place and come onto the property, bringing the item onto the property. And not that they couldn't come onto the property, but it depends on those drivers as to what they would utilize to bring a component onto the property and the delivery schedule. They might even have off-hour deliveries, depending on
Understood.
on the scheduling and the item as to how large an item they need to tie up traffic.
Do you know what side of Vincent Place is permissible parking, which side's not?
It's
Or is it both sides parking? I'm sorry, I didn't drive down Vincent Place.
It's double-sided parking.
Okay.
It's certainly limited. Overnight parking is prohibited.
Mhm.
A truck can drive up all the way to the end of Vincent Place, and there is a little cul-de-sac area where they can turn around. They're not totally restricted to, let's say if they drive in and they're facing the end of Vincent Place, and they need to turn around, and they can't do it. If there's cars on both sides of the street, okay, it's tough to do even a K-turn at that point. But now, granted, with Vincent Place, then you can go all the way up to the top of Vincent Place. There's a circular area up there, and you can, just turn around and come back and drive and come out Vincent Place relatively safely. It's Vincent Place is a tough street to get in and out of, but regardless of whether your building is there or not. So I think the point here is you're offering what looks like another driveway. You're going all the way down, but it's narrow. So you're relying on the fact that the truck driver is going to know I have to deliver on Vincent Place. I can't go, but if they go up to the Pompton Avenue driveway that you're proposing, if they go down there, how are they going to, if all those spaces are occupied, how are they going to be able to turn around? They're going to have to back up.
Well, there's other opportunities. There's space number 16 has a widened area that you can certainly use that as a temporary component. You have that no parking area next to 17. If there's no handicap space being occupied, you have that area in addition to 16 that can be utilized for temporary delivery services to the front door. But certainly we're not suggesting that they back out onto Pompton Avenue. Certainly when you leave Pompton Avenue, you're going to be prohibited from making a left-hand turn. You can see that on the drawing is that you have to make a right turn. And the same issue with Vincent Place, you can make a left and right-hand turn, and sometimes it's very difficult to make a left-hand turn coming out of Vincent Place. So I anticipate that you'll have the ability to queue on the property until the safe means of ingress and egress, that either the vehicles that are parked there or delivery vehicles will have that opportunity. But again, I don't foresee that as being a major problem from the standpoint of delivery services. This is not a component that requires a lot of deliveries. You might have, as I said, Staples. You would have lawyer services deliver. You would have some delivery services from the residential components. But again, it's no different than the residential properties to the east from the standpoint of delivery.
Jim, I live on Elmwood Road, and I've got 15 Amazon trucks coming down there every day. So if you're going to put 3 apartments in that building, I mean, maybe I'm being a little, pessimistic here, but if you're going to put 3 apartments in that building, and you get somebody who's on their computer, 10 hours a day ordering, I see these guys drive up with envelopes, and put. But my other point, I don't know whether you ever considered this, even if you took one of those spots and made it a K-turn area, if you just prohibited parking, that somebody could go in, granted, you would be lowering the number of available parking spaces, but from a safety standpoint, it might be easier to do that. In other words, Verona Park does that. Very narrow roadway that goes through there. But they have spots in Verona Park where you can do a K-turn, if you want, because it's a 2-way street. So I don't know if that ever crossed your mind.
Well, we looked at that, but again, shortage of parking, we tried to achieve as much parking as we could. We identified that on the plan. There were short 7 spaces based on the usage. But certainly, we can certainly do that as part of.
Well, if that bothered the majority of the board more than the lack of spaces, let's say, you could do that. I'm just saying that could be done. That's all I'm asking.
Not only can it be done, we're more than happy to do it if that's a major part of the board's concern. And looking on it, either spot 3, spot 4, or spot 16 all have extra space next to them. So those spaces make, I'll call it some greater sense than some of the other spots. But more than happy to have the engineer design it if the board still makes that a requirement.
And just to refresh my memory, you said 5 attorneys, 1 admin?
That's correct.
2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, is that what it was?
2 2-bedroom and 1 1-bedroom.
Okay, so 5, 6, 2 per, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the Amazon trucks, I mean, and I'm not a car expert, but I know cars are quite large. I know, Mr. Loy, I happen to see you driving around town, and I know you drive a particularly, what looks to me to be a large car. It's a Ford truck.
That's correct.
Do you know how long that is?
Yes, it's slightly over 19 feet long, less than 20 feet long.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big car.
I actually looked it up for this hearing.
Well, thank you for being prepared, because I didn't know. But yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned even just with cars getting in and out of these spots. And I think I would prefer to see, I mean, if there's already a shortage of spots, I think we need to look at whether, taking away 1 spot, that it makes it safer is a
Well,
better
that's what I
solution,
was
yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
The other problem I'm worried about is we talked about that the cars have to overhang the curb, right? I know when I drive, I don't like to overhang the curb because I'm afraid I'm going to hit the skirt, so I always pull it back. And if you do that, you're even left, if people start to do that, you're even left with less space than that 24 feet, right? So if people don't know to push that car forward, you could block in someone next to you, right? You really block them in.
Let's see, so there's a bus stop right outside, yes?
Yes.
And that is not, I think that's not compromised as a result of this, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
This is, sorry, it's not. So the bus stop isn't compromised as a result of this curb cut, right? It's just existing to remain, right?
The existing driveway, you can see it in the background, is, again, we have three access driveways, two on Pompton Avenue and one on Vincent. We're eliminating one of the access driveways on Pompton. That was like a service driveway to approach the front of the building. That's being replaced by one driveway 30 feet wide on Pompton Avenue. And the northerly side of the existing driveway is where the northerly side of the proposed driveway would be. So we don't want to move it any closer towards Claridge Drive, because Claridge Drive has a traffic signal at that point. We want to keep it away from that as much as possible. And certainly, we want to prohibit left-hand turns coming out of that. There'll be a sign identifying that and being prohibited as well. The curb line would have to be replaced where the existing driveway is on the southerly end of the property, and we're moving the driveway entrance from existing driveway entrance on Vincent Place further towards the west, so that you have a clear separation of about 15 feet from this property to the neighbors before you would even get close to the new driveway entrance. So it's moving it further away from the residential component.
Okay. Can you go over one more time? So this swath of land that's 40 feet or whatever it is, it's a right of way, right? And what was that for originally?
Well, there was, before this development, Vincent Place was developed under a major subdivision in I believe the 60s. Before it was developed, and before Claridge was developed, there was a water tank. The town had a water tank to provide storage of water on top of the hill. And there was a pipeline, there's a 12-inch pipeline that goes up from Pompton Avenue all the way to that tank. And the town needed an access rights to be able to get to that property. The property was owned by private individuals, not owned by the township. And that was the point where they would have means of accessing the tank for servicing it, and also to maintain the pipeline that would provide water to the easterly side of the community. It's a 1 million-gallon water tank, and it's certainly a vital component towards the water system in the community. And when the property was developed, there was 20 feet reserved on this property, and there was 20 feet reserved on the Claridge Drive side of the property. So there's a 40-foot width. And as part of that, it was never vacated. It was never utilized from the standpoint on the property owner side, the owner side. But the pipeline is in the 20 feet that's on the Claridge Drive. So if there's a need to repair, and it has been repaired many times over the years, they have to dig up Claridge Drive to make that repair service. There's no need to make any repairs on the property owner side because there's no pipeline within that area. But the reservation is still there from the standpoint of a title encroachment.
Okay, so it's still active and presumably needs
It's
to be
not
accessible.
utilized.
Right.
It's not intended to be utilized. It was never vacated. The rights were never given up. There's no need to, if the owner wanted to, he could secure with the municipality a vacation of that area. There's no benefit to the owner to do that. The remaining portion of the panhandle is a wooded area. It's undeveloped. There's many trees that have been there, come down, storms, what have you. There pretty much is a drainage ditch that traverses that from the higher area of the property down into this property. It's not, it traverses this property overland from the standpoint next to the existing driveway that's there now. There's a swale, so to speak, that the water from that upper portion traverses it before it gets to the existing drainage system closer towards Pompton Avenue. And you'll see that drainage system that traverses the property. This has been here before the owner acquired the property. It's a drainage system that takes water from Pompton Avenue across Claridge Drive and further to Pilgrim Shopping Center down into Cedar Grove.
Okay, so it's okay to build on that right away?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, you're never going to need to dig it up or anything, right?
There's no need, there's no utilities within that area. What we are planning to do is to intercept that drainage that comes off of the panhandle. We want to intercept that, you can see it on the plan, where it was a surface flow before. We're intercepting that with a new drainage pipe underneath the parking lot and taking it and tying it to the existing pipeline close to Pompton Avenue. So that's being taken independently. It was necessary because there's no way to build this parking lot without satisfying that drainage concern that would cause havoc on this property. So we're providing that drainage for the parking lot as well as the upland flow. There's no need to store that. And you look at the calculations that we've come up with, there is a stormwater requirement on this property, stormwater storage requirement. I know Boswell talked about, is it a minor development, is it a major development? Based on our analysis, it's a minor development. Anything over 400 square feet of additional coverage or impervious coverage is required to be stored. We're doing that. If it's less than a half an acre of disturbed area, it's a minor stormwater requirement. So we're under half an acre square footage of disturbance. So we have to meet the requirement of the stormwater ordinance, where we're required to store a component based on the increase in impervious coverage.
It's
The
not
increase in
a
impervious
steep slope,
coverage is
is
a
it?
result of the,
It's not a steep slope, is it?
excuse me?
A steep slope?
Steep slope is not an issue on this property. It's a relatively gently sloped property from east to west towards Pompton Avenue. The component of steepness doesn't come to the undeveloped portion of the panhandle, so it's not an issue with this. So we are storing on the property. We're handling the roof runoff as well as the two parking spaces. That equates to the impervious coverage that we need to store as a result of this development. It's required to store approximately 1,000 cubic feet of water. And we're doing that as part of a biobasin. It's a green infrastructure project, very similar to what is utilized in other communities as well as here. It's a bio-infiltration system that takes the stormwater from the roof and the two parking spaces and collects it within this basin, and before it's discharged eventually into the existing drainage on Vincent Place. We are not required to store any other than that. It just works out that the runoff from the roof itself and those two parking spaces is sufficient to handle the requirement for the stormwater drainage for the system, and it equates to about just over 1,000 cubic feet of storage we're providing on the property.
I do have some questions on the drainage. I was going through my notes. So the plans that we received, the ones that were the most new one, I think the ones that are dated April. The limit of disturbance on those plans is 22,400 square feet, correct? I think it's on the second sheet, I believe, or the third sheet.
Let me get my notes.
Because the Verona stormwater requirements, they're more stringent than the state requirements. So based on the stormwater requirements of Verona, if you're disturbing more than 0.5 acres, you qualify as major development. And the new disturbance area of 22,400 square feet, that's 0.51 acres. So that would be a major development.
I don't believe that's the way it's written. I have the ordinance here, and I'll go over with you.
Okay. I'm looking at the definitions, under definitions, where it says how does it define a major development?
Well, this proposed site disturbance is 20,120 square feet, okay, which is less than a half an acre. And the major stormwater requirement starts at a half an acre, so we're less than that requirement. So we're meeting the standard from the standpoint of the minor.
Could you repeat what the disturbance area was one more time? I'm looking on sheet 4. Over here it says 22,400.
That is, you see that's on the soil erosion plan?
Correct.
All right. Soil erosion requires us to do an analysis of disturbance, including any utilities that you do off track, which includes anything off the property. So that's why it's that larger component, okay? The actual on-site disturbance is what I stated, which is 20,120 square feet. Because that other component you see from the plan that the Soil Erosion Office requires, they're looking at area outside the limits of the property, okay? The sidewalk area, which is in the public right-of-way, so anything that's in the public right-of-way you're disturbing, soil erosion required us to indicate that as part of the disturbance. So that's why that would
So
be...
that extra area is
Right, that's
included
all-
in that. So
right,
what's
that-
the actual disturbance area? One more time?
The actual disturbance area is 20,120 square feet, which is less than an acre.
That's another thing that I think needs clarification. So based on the Verona code, it's any disturbance or increase in impervious area since 2004, I believe. So maybe this is something that the board can discuss, that if we want the applicant to provide testimony or evidence that there has been no work since 2004, or if we, it's just a suggestion.
Who could provide that testimony?
The engineer, the owner.
Question, no work since 2004?
Yes, because based on the code, it says that the disturbance since 2004, if it's been increased, if it's been done 0.5 acres, then it qualifies as a major development. So it's just like a confirmation that there has been no work done since 2004.
We can certainly represent that we're not aware of any, but we don't have the history of the property since 2004.
Okay.
I
But we're not aware of anything. I mean, the house is old and there's no obvious new additions and that we can...
think an open request, I think the town record should be sufficient. Mr. Chairman, I think, any permits that were pulled, and I think Mr. Loya would agree, if this were going to go further as a condition of approval, be subject to that proof. I mean, I'm jumping way ahead, but...
That's certainly fine.
And also there's another question about ADA accessibility. I see a parking space, ADA parking space, it's number 17, correct? That's ADA accessible?
What space are you questioning?
17, that's the one that's the handicap space?
Right.
And that's the only one on the property that's handicapped. So where is the ADA access actually into the building? Because I see a bunch of stairs, but is there...
The stairs right next to that there's an exterior handicapped elevator.
Oh, that's an elevator.
Lift.
On the left, okay.
To the right of those stairs, there's that handicapped access for the elevator.
So they will use
It's only
that.
3 or 4 feet high?
About 3.5 feet.
Okay. And also from an engineering point of view, I agree with the board that taking out spaces that are closer to the roads, like 15, 16, 1, 2, it depends. But I think taking spaces out will help with the circulation of the traffic. So.
Well, we do show, I understand the engineer's concern, which is your site distance. You're going out to Pompton Avenue. You want to have a safe egress onto Pompton Avenue, right? At one time, we had a space next to 15, and we recognized in the earlier submittal to the Basel reviewed, we had a space next to parking space 15, and we felt that it didn't give us good site distance from the standpoint to the south on Pompton Avenue, but looking at it now, I do show that you have over 600 feet of site distance down to Linden Avenue, traffic signal. So you have ample opportunity to see the traffic approaching the property from the south, and that certainly meets whatever requirements necessary. We maintain that there's also shows a monument sign we're putting on the property that the architect shows, and we push that back 5.5 feet beyond the property line, so that, again, that would not cause interference from the standpoint of a site distance problem. So we have a clear site distance. There will be no trees located at that area as well. The tree plan would show that there's no trees on that area that would help cause a site distance problem. So that's the reason I think why your office had recommended removing that space at one time.
I would say it's also backing out of those spaces. Side distance is correct. There is side distance space available, but as the board said, I think backing out might be a problem. It might be a potential problem for people.
And as indicated, we're more than happy to remove one of those spaces.
All right, is there any other questions on sheet 2?
Can you talk a little bit about the impervious coverage calculations, the increases?
Yeah, sure. What we did an analysis what was on that property before, and the total site area is 33,340 square feet. The existing building represented 3,000 square feet. The existing driveways, the 3 driveways on the property was 3,200 square feet. The patio, there's a patio behind the building, which is another 673 square feet. The stairways and walks was another 230 square feet. So the building coverage, we did a building coverage calculation. That's just the existing garage and the existing building was 9.12%. The lot coverage at that point, the existing lot coverage was 21%. So we're certainly well underneath the requirements for the zoning district. Under the proposed conditions, the building footprint expands from 3,041 square feet to 3,468 square feet. It's a little bit larger footprint than the existing structure. It's a 2-story component. The new parking on the north side is 6,200 square feet. The front steps and walk and the elevator area in that area is 350 square feet. The sidewalk and the storage area, keep in mind where we're putting the storage for the refuse containers is immediately behind the building. That would be brought out onto Vincent Place. That area represents 580 square feet and also includes the stairwell. Underneath the stairwell is a impervious area. So the south side parking is 450 square feet. So the lot coverage is going from 21.6% to 33%. And the building coverage goes from 9.1% to 10.4%. Now you say, why is it, it's a larger building, but we're eliminating the garage. So it's a minor increase. So the entire, the new impervious coverage is 11,122 square feet versus what was there before. It's an increase of 3,900 square feet of impervious coverage. So 3,900 square feet, that's a component that we have to analyze for storage requirements from the standpoint of stormwater management. We're required to store 3 inches of stormwater as a result of that, and that comes up to the 976 square feet or cubic feet of required storage for the property, and we provide that in the biobasin that you see on the plan as being over 1,000 square feet of storage.
So can you explain the volume that would be discharged to the sewer system versus the volume that would be discharged to this fire retention basin?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, this is a panhandle property. The panhandle portion of the property is in a different zoning district, quite coincidentally. It's in a residential zoning district. The commercial property is really a larger component. That area is undeveloped. We need to collect the water that's coming off of that property. It's an upland property. It's surface water flow through a series of drainage ditches that abut the residential properties to the south of that area. Flows westerly, overland flow, until it's picked up by the drainage system close to Pompton Avenue. There's a drainage swale adjacent to the existing driveway that accesses off of Pompton Avenue to the existing garage, but there's a drainage swale that is between the northerly property line and the driveway, and that's picked up by the drainage system on close to Pompton Avenue. So that's why we're putting in this intercepting storm drainage system underneath the parking lot to collect that, so it won't overflow onto the driveway and parking lot itself.
So you probably know better than anybody about the infrastructure, in the greater neighborhood. Does it have the capacity to handle that?
Well, the water flows there now. We're not adding additional flow. It's the exact same inflow that's coming out from that portion of the property before. The only thing we're doing is picking it up, and we're taking it into the existing system. So it's not that we're increasing the amount of flow coming from that component of the property. There on the first mountain, there's a series of groundwater issues. Certainly on Vincent Place, I was knowledgeable of that when I was a municipal engineer. We had a series of icing conditions, particularly in the wintertime, when the groundwater is very shallow because of the rock structure underneath the first mountain. And certainly that really contributes to some of the issues that might exist on Vincent Place and to the rear yards. But most of this water is sheet flow. There's no flow coming off of Claridge Drive onto this property. Claridge Drive has an independent drainage system that collects all the stormwater from Claridge Drive and the upland properties of Claridge units themselves. And there is drainage on Claridge Drive that collects that and brings it down to the same area as it closest to Pompton Avenue before it's picked up and taken northerly through Pilgrim Shopping Center into Cedar Grove. So it's a relatively small area, but there is surface water that traverses that property. We have to accommodate for that.
I'm just gonna ask a question about the trash enclosure. Is it gonna be enclosed, or is it just gonna be open, that area in the back? The refuse storage area? Is there any plans to enclose it?
There's a culvert, we're gonna pick it up at a culvert that comes through the property. Is that what you're referring to?
No, the trash area.
Oh, a garbage, okay.
Yeah, the trash area.
Yeah, we show a refuse storage area immediately behind the building. There's an alcove, so to speak, that we would provide a storage of refuse within cans and brought out to Vincent Place where we picked up. It's better than being picked up on Pompton Avenue. That's where it's being picked up now. The residents there now bring that garbage out towards Vincent Place on collection day. The owner will still be doing the same thing. He's entitled to the same service that everyone else is in the community. We're not providing dumpster service or daily service of pickup on this property because it's not necessary.
So there's no enclosure proposed for that area?
No.
Okay.
Because we'll talk about it a little bit later with the lighting scheme, but just to prep myself for that, maybe a question more for the applicant. Is there a proposed plan to have this parking lot managed by a company, or like permits or signage or anything?
I'm sorry, to have what managed by?
Like a company manage the parking lot or signage in terms of, who can park in that lot? I mean, if I recall, isn't there like a bus stop there, like is anything that limits just the general public from using that lot if they so felt like it?
I am a believer of sign pollution, so I did not plan on putting up those signs like you see those, if you park here, you're going to be towed or whatever.
Okay.
If it became an issue, I would certainly consider putting up signs, but no, there's no current plan.
Okay.
Nor would I be thrilled if I felt forced to put up, not forced by you, but forced meaning like people were parking there.
Yeah.
Frankly, based upon the location of the property, being that King's is right next door, I would think if you're going to park somewhere, you're going to park in this enormous King's parking lot versus my, law firm lot or whatever. So I don't see that as an issue. So I don't plan on putting up signs that say keep out or something.
Okay.
Is that where the overflow is going to be recommended to the King's parking lot?
I don't plan on having any overflow, so. And I don't want to be on record saying that I'm telling people to park in King's either, so I'll use my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent on that question.
No, we discussed with the architect earlier for the HVAC, with the condensing units. Where do you recommend these going?
The air conditioning condensing units?
Oh, yeah, there's an area adjacent. I wouldn't recommend it on the east side of the building, because it's next to the residential component. There's opportunities between the curb and the building itself on the north side of the building that really would have no adverse effect on any properties adjacent to it. So that would be the area you would put compressors or condensers to service the building. So it might be 2 or 3 units. I mean, I don't know how many would it be, 2 or 3 condensers at that point.
Jim, assuming the board's definition of setback is accurate, would that be within the setback, or would there be enough room?
It's an accessory component, it's not a principal use. Air conditioning units are accessory, they're not principal. Principal uses are the structure itself.
Again, using the board's definition, how many feet are required and how many, look, again, take out the definitional.
Well, it would fit in that area. You have about 5 feet separating the curb and the building, so there's plenty of room to put a condenser in.
How many feet would the unit be from the street?
From the street, well, from the street itself, it would be a minimum of 50 feet, probably more like 60 feet from Pompton Avenue. We don't measure it from Claridge Drive because it's a driveway.
So I'm just saying, but there's enough room where it's
absolutely.
placed that you're not going to be violating a setback in accordance with the town's definition.
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah. And it would not impact the residential areas on Vincent Place because it's on the opposite side. All right, sheet 3. Is what we call the tree removal mitigation plan. And on this plan, I've identified 15 trees that have to be removed as part of this project. I didn't evaluate the condition of these trees. When I took the analysis, it was in the wintertime, so I couldn't tell whether they were alive or dead, but certainly there are 15 trees that have to be removed as part of this project because of the development of it. I've identified those on the tree removal plan side of the drawing. They range in size from 6-inch all the way up to 36-inch. And there are 6 evergreen trees. There are 3 evergreen trees that have to be removed and identify the height because that requires how we mitigate those trees. Based on the ordinance, the tree ordinance, based on the size of the trees and their locations, we're required to mitigate those trees, and I've identified that 23 trees have to be replanted as part of the mitigation plan. And I show the components of that as being a mixture of different varieties and their general locations. There's 17 trees located within the buffer area. And I show the variety that's anticipated by that, and also from the standpoint, we show 31 mixture of the shrubs that are in that area. And I know that there was, the Environmental Commission had an issue with the burning bush. We're certainly, as the owners indicated, that we're willing to modify that to satisfy their issues. I know that the ordinance has a litany of acceptable plantings, so we can certainly incorporate that as part of the plan.
How tall are these trees, the plantings that will be in the buffer zone? What is their expected height at maturity?
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty
Oh,
hearing.
sorry. What is the anticipated height at maturity of the trees that are being planted in the
Well,
buffer
those
zone?
trees would be 3-inch caliper, which is a pretty large tree.
Yeah, at maturity, do you have
At maturity, they would be 30 feet high.
Yes, I was gonna say, I put 30.
I mean, Red Sunset or October Glory is mature, 30 feet high. I know some trees get larger than that, but they're initially put in at 3-inch caliper, which is about 10 to 15-foot trees, and they would grow, as I said before, about a 30-foot high component.
When they grew to be that height, or even slightly less than that, do you anticipate that they would pose any kind of obstruction that's not currently there? So blocking out light or dropping lots of really obnoxious things off the leaves? I mean, any kind of sort of nuisance to the neighbor next door?
I don't see it, I mean, they're shade trees. I mean, they're going to be deciduous, so they're going to be vacant leaves in the wintertime, as all trees are, deciduous trees. There's sufficient distance between that planting area and the neighbor. I think, I don't know whether I have a dimension on that, but as I recall, it's, I don't want to be told, but it's at least 15 to 20 feet from that property line, which is common between us and the neighboring house. There is no trees in that area separating between this property and the neighbor. It's all lawn area that the neighbor has. This would provide, the ordinance calls for a dense landscape buffer. That's what we're providing. And as I said, I think the owners agreed that he would allow how to have a tree expert come in and evaluate the sizing of the trees and making sure that trees that are either deceased or diseased would not be replaced, but certainly what we've envisioned, based on our analysis, we have 15 trees that we have to mitigate, and we provide 23 new trees based on the requirements of the ordinance.
Yeah, and to further answer your question, I looked at the tree list. I probably spent an hour on it, looking up the trees, and these are like these, that's why they're called like red, when they're amber and red.
Right.
They're like these, in the fall, they're going to be like this beautiful red, like, so I tried to make it, I'll call it pretty. So I pictured it being very nice, but if the tree experts or the environmental commission or the shade tree commission says, there's something obnoxious about the tree, I'm not married to it. I was actually looking for a visual, trying to make it as nice and pretty as possible.
I just know there's lots of litigation. I recall reading articles years ago in the UK over certain trees that, I mean, they grow to be quite high and they block out the sun, and there's a ton of litigation. So I'm always sort of cognizant of how it might impact the properties around. And I mean,
Yeah, I don't think that these will. I think the neighbor will like it, but as the engineer indicated, and as you know, we're required to make some type of buffer like this. We're trying to make it as, not only do what you want it to do and, block the view of, I'll call it the commercial property, but also be very attractive, both on their side and our side.
Any other questions on the tree removal plan?
Yeah, I have one. I know the tree removal plan is probably going to change a little bit because I know you're going to take out the burning bush, but I think the plan needs a little more detail because I think it's missing the quantities in the schedule. I don't know if that was left out on purpose or because the plan was not 100% done yet.
Well,
it's in the table.
Well, we do identify the number of trees, and it's a mixture. We're trying to show, we don't say each particular one of what's called out to be, but we give the owner an opportunity. You look at a 17 mixture of Red Sunset, October Glory, or Blue Spruce. We're trying to create a mixture. It depends on the variety, what's available at the time of planting. Sometimes you go to a landscape yard to pick up trees, and they don't have them. So we don't want to hold up a CO if, in fact, the owner can't get that particular tree at that time of the year. So he has a pretty good mixture of trees that could satisfy the requirements, and certainly that's the intention, that what's available at the time of planting. I don't know what would be available. Because I know sometimes other projects I've worked on, you identify a certain tree, and you can't get it. It's not in the season for it, or you run out. So that's why we try to give it an opportunity to mix as much as possible.
So will the quantities be finalized before we actually if the plan is approved, or would that be?
Well, we could certainly provide it. I mean, we're providing certainly the number of trees and bushes that are going to be on the property. That's what's intended. And when the planting contractor would come in, he would take this plan and solicit prices on those individual items.
When you say the quantity, you mean of each particular tree?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Right below the tree removal plan, there's a table which has the quantity code, botanical name, common name. There's nothing under quantities. It just caught my eye.
Okay. Yeah, so as the engineer indicated, we believe we're going to pick out exactly what tree. This shows primarily where the trees will be, has the number of total trees. But you're right, we have not identified that.
So it will be finalized later.
8 of these or 10 of these, but yes, that will be done before the actual planting.
And so, as she said, I think it will have to be a condition of approval.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, the next plan is the soil erosion and sediment control plan. We have modified this plan, I think, 3 times to the soil erosion office. I believe we have all the requirements that they needed from the standpoint of limited disturbance, identification of where the silker fabric would be. We're waiting to hear back their approval. This was submitted to them at the end of April. So I think we're good to go from that standpoint, but these are all the components and necessary part of the sediment control plan. We do provide a sequence of construction, which he had required, and we would provide access. Access during construction is going to be limited off of Pompton Avenue. We're not providing access off of Vincent Place. As you can see, that there's going to be a silt fence separating Vincent Place from the project. There's going to be a lot of construction taking place in this property, and certainly we don't want to have the components of construction equipment entering the property from Vincent Place. So that's why everything is coming off of Pompton Avenue. And we do show the area of disturbance, which you could see goes well beyond the limits of the property line based on, the curb work that we have to do on both streets as well as the utilities. So they wanted to make sure that we incorporated its area of disturbance. The area of disturbance, as I said, is much less on the property. It's 20,120 square feet. But we had to indicate the total area disturbance for the soil erosion office. Are there any questions on the soil erosion plan?
Would you be able to show the limit of disturbance area that's within the site on the site plan?
Show what?
Show the limit of disturbance area that's actually within the site on the site plan?
Well, I could do that.
Yeah, because just if someone's looking at the plan, and I did the same thing, I assumed it was a major development. So if you could just show that.
I did that calculation, but I didn't show, because soil erosion wanted to show the
Yeah.
exact limits. So I can give you that calculation.
Yeah, if you could just add that to the site plan.
Absolutely. Next plan is the soil erosion biobasin detail plan. And this is for the 1,000 cubic feet of storage that we're required to provide for the property. I show a blow-up of the plan. Shows the the planning detail on the plan. We show the inlet and outlet structures on the plan. We show a cross-section of the basin itself. We anticipate this is a relatively small biobasin. It's only perhaps 1.5 feet deep at most when the water is at its highest elevation. So there's not a standpoint of a safety component that I'm concerned about. To put a fence around this, certainly it could be done, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it would be unattractive from that standpoint. But we do provide the detail of the mixture and matches of biobasin plants. Again, this is something that's very unique, is trying to get these plants. We do identify, I think, a location. There's a Pinelands nursery and supply that provides these particular biobasin plant list. Again, it's very susceptible as to what might be available and not available, so there might have to be some modification on that. But here you see the detail of it. You can see we're taking the water from the structure itself as well as from the parking lot, bringing it into the biobasin. It would infiltrate through the biobasin and picked up by the discharge structure. And I show the details for all those structures on the plan. And I show the sequence of construction for this biobasin. This would be later on during the construction process. Certainly the components would be done much later in the project from the standpoint of when it would be done. The building itself has to be built, the parking lots have to be built. This is in the latter stages of it. But certainly, this is what we could consider to be a green infrastructure portion of the project.
When I reviewed the drainage plan, the new one, I saw there were some minor modifications made to the basin, right? The scour holes were added, so it would just be a condition of approval that we're going to review this plan, because it's a revised submission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions on this plan?
How much does the state have, since this is on a state highway?
Correct.
How much does the state have to get involved?
Well, we have to get permits in the state for the drive, because the only work we're doing within the state is we're removing a driveway apron and a curb, and we're widening a driveway apron. We're not anticipating taking any utilities out to Pompton Avenue, because most of the utilities now come off of Vincent Place. So we do need to provide a new water service for the independent water service for the sprinkler system. We're expecting to utilize existing utilities on the property. Again, everything we anticipate is coming off of Vincent Place. We don't want to necessarily bring it out to Pompton Avenue, because between the sidewalk and the curb, there's a 12-inch water main that goes from Linden Avenue all the way up to Claridge Drive, and it goes up Claridge Drive. And it's not that deep, and certainly to try to get a utility across that 12-inch water main, I think is rather difficult. And certainly we don't want to tap the 12-inch water main. I don't think the city would allow us to do that. Maybe would want us to take that out of a local system, which is the water main on Vincent Place. So we want to avoid that, but we do have to get permits for the driveway apron, closing the driveway apron, replacing it with new curb, and widening the new driveway apron.
And I don't know what you may not be aware of this, but there's a lot of markings already on Vincent Place from the gas company, from the water, sewer, or whatever.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's connected to your project or whether it's just a regular upgrade that they're...
No, I've noticed that since last fall, that the gas company's been out there marking the utilities, but it's going to have to be provided by the excavation contractor. He'll have to call the 800 number to mark out the utilities as part of the project.
If it's approved.
And the last sheet is the...
In the basin, do you have to have a overflow pipe, or is...
It does. It has a weir. At the top of the outlet structure, there's a 5-foot wide rectangular weir that allows for the overflow. It also has a component of an inlet grate that if it exceeds that, it would go in the inlet grate on top of that, so there is that ability to handle a overflow condition, which I don't anticipate. There is internal pipeline that would bring the water that infiltrates through the biobasin into the outlet structure as well. So it's all been considered as part of that outlet structure.
All right. And just out of curiosity, how long will this hold water for?
It's rather pervious material that we're utilizing. You have a biobasin that consists of a certain type of I can't read my own notes. There's a layer of perforated stone. There's an undisturbed area of soil. There's a sand layer as well that's made as part of the aggregate of sand, and there's a gravel component that's a part of this as well. So we're not relying necessarily upon infiltration into the existing ground conditions, but there is opportunity for that. We want to be able to take this water that doesn't infiltrate off the site into the existing storm drainage system on Vincent Place. So I would think there is a certain component. We didn't do soil tests because we're not relying upon percolation as part of this project. We're assuming that it's a hard clay structure underneath, recognizing the fact that in the area there's a lot of groundwater. So there's not that you get necessarily a lot of infiltration depending on the level of bedrock in the area. So we didn't think it was necessary to do independent percolation tests. We wanted to take this as part of the storage requirement and then handle it and then discharge it in accordance with the requirements.
Jim, if I can double back to your issue about what I asked about the state permits, the one thing I was sort of doubling back to a prior point about the parking, and you or Mr. Aloya kept saying, well, we'll prohibit a left-hand turn out of that new parking lot across Pompton Avenue. Is that something that you can do without the state's permission, or do you have to get the state to sign off on that?
I would think the state is going to require it, okay, whether it's part of their permit, as part of an access permit.
So you would have to ask them, though, to approve that?
Correct.
That no left turn?
Correct.
Okay.
The enforcement, I don't know whether, Mr. Lawyer, certainly the enforcement might require the municipality to pass an ordinance.
Well, that
prohibits.
You anticipated my next question, but that's,
So that might be necessary.
Because often the state or the county will come back to the municipality, and they want to cover their butt, I'll put it that way, and get the town to approve, what they plan on doing. So that's, at a minimum, they might ask for a resolution or a town ordinance. Okay.
They might require you to pass a traffic modification to traffic ordinance.
Okay.
And the last plan is the site lighting plan. We wanted to minimize the amount of intensity of lighting on this property. We have what's considered to be a 15-foot high components of the lamps on the exterior of the parking lot. It's 3 of those. They're very low intensity standpoint of color selection. Still hasn't been worked out, but certainly from the standpoint that we want to minimize. We don't want it to look like Yankee Stadium, recognizing the fact that we're adjacent to a residential neighborhood. These would have ability to be dusk to dawn, and certainly if the owner there is an ability to put these on timers as well. So we certainly haven't worked that out from the standpoint. I do show the foot candles that would be shown on the property. I show the isolux patterns that are on property. They range from anywhere as high as 1 foot candle to a 1/2 foot candle throughout the parking lot. We have 5 wall sconces, small wall sconces that provide lighting to the back of the building. These are vertically directed downward to provide minimum amount of lighting to the walkway that goes out to Vincent Place, as well as towards the parking lot, the two-space parking lot to the south of the structure. Again, these are all very low intensity, average of anywhere from a foot to a half a foot candle throughout the property. We do show electric charging station in that one space that we talked about earlier. It's a wall-mounted charging station that could be utilized by the individuals on the property. We showed the detail of that. It's very similar to what other projects have utilized in the town as well as other areas in the neighborhood. So it's rather straightforward. The electrical will be connected independently into the building itself, and they could either be operated with dusk to dawn or certainly timers to minimize its impact, depending on the use of the owner of the property.
So are there any other lights besides these on the property?
I don't recall whether the architect, he might have some sconces by the front steps.
We have a couple of small wall sconces by the doors.
That might be
I understand this from a law office, commercial office, or, or professional office perspective, but from a residential perspective. Again, 2 of those spaces for residents, not necessarily proximal to the front door. I mean, I thought I saw, this is like the paved side, on the other side, front entrances where trying to figure out, like, from a resident's perspective, like what is going to drive where they park. These are the lights that are available to them. We're not talking about, right now, lights and stands and all this other stuff. But I'm just trying to look at this from like because one of the discussions was the mixed use and all this other stuff. From a residential standpoint, what does this look like to a resident? 3 properties or 3 apartments, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom. It's anywhere from, up to 6 vehicles, I could think. I mean, is this, I don't know, am I just overthinking, like?
No, I think, the architect certainly identified that. I think it makes sense that if you have a residence component, they come home 1 o'clock in the morning, you don't want it to have it dusk to dawn or turned off at 11 o'clock at night. The wall sconces could be left on a timer, 24 hours, that there's at least lighting for those individuals, the residents, to come home and secure their parking and access to the rear of the building or the front of the building. So it all depends on how you
The parking could be motion, couldn't it?
motion detection, certainly.
I know Verona has a lot of lighting standards. Would you be able to provide like a detailed foot candle analysis? Like what is at the property line so we can like compare it against what the code has? Because I know you show the contours right now, but the actual like numbering,
Yeah,
I don't know
we
what
can, I know what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
this is normally sufficient, but if it's, we're representing that you have a foot candle as maximum intensity on the property. So, it's gonna be a foot candle or less throughout the property, as we show on the property. There's nobody, independent lighting leaving this property. We have a buffer area separating the rear of the property, the side yard of the property from the neighbor, so the neighbor is not gonna see these lights that are on wall mounted 15 feet high. Those trees are, initially are 8 to 10 feet high on top of a berm. We could certainly do that, but I think we're generous with what we provide here from the standpoint that we're representing, we have a foot candle as maximum around the property. There's no light leaving this property. We're getting more independent lighting coming from Claridge Drive and from Pompton Avenue and from Vincent Place intruding on this property than we're intruding on neighbors. So it's minimalistic. In fact, we did look at, there's a street light on Claridge Drive, and I know the owner and I were discussing putting a dusk to dawn off of that pole that public service could provide to provide lighting to the property, but he thought better of it. It would be obnoxious from the standpoint of, a light that would project the dusk to dawn you see on many commercial properties. He wanted a less intense component of it from the standpoint of attractiveness. And the source of the lighting, as you can see, is not going to be visible off the property, which is often a concern.
That concludes Mr. Help's testimony. If there are any other questions from the public.
Does the board have any additional questions for Mr. Held? Is there any?
There was a rather extensive, in the latest Boswell report, on the roof leaders, sump pump discharge rate, and property maintenance guidelines. I think, Jim, you tried to cover all of that in your
I noticed that, Mr. Ryan, that that's standard from the standpoint, and we would commit to all those requirements that Boswell Engineering had committed to. There's no intention.
There's nothing in there that you would not be willing to agree to, should we approve the entire
Exactly.
project. So,
Is there anyone from the public who would like to ask some questions of Mr. Held at this time? Please feel free to.
Anna Fusaro, Verona. Hello, sir. Earlier, I believe that my understanding was that the fact that this project will be mixed use, meaning residential and commercial legal office, was fine, was not in conflict with any ordinance. So my question is, in the application that I've had a chance to read now, letter A says, the proposed mixed residential and professional office, law office, use does not meet the requirements for permitted or conditional use. Therefore, a use variance is required. So I'm not clear on how the understanding I had, which was the mixed use was fine and did not require a variance. So my question is, what is the use variance for?
Right. Let me back up a minute.
Is that a valid question?
No,
Okay, thank you. Because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an engineer.
That's a great question.
Okay.
As I said, the zoning ordinance allows for a mixed use, right? The mixed use being the component of residential and professional office. It can't be medical. So one advantage here is no medical use anticipated. It's not permitted. If there was a component later on that the owner wanted to bring a medical use in there, we would have to go back before the board, but that's be it aside. The ordinance requires us, there's 5 components to allow this as a conditional use. You're allowed to do a certain thing on the property, certain use on the property, if you meet those 5 conditions, all right? To be allowed to, it's a permitted conditional use. If we don't meet any one of those 5 conditions, okay, it becomes a use variance or expansion of a non-conforming use. Now, if we met all those 5 components...
I'm sorry, this says it does not meet the requirements for permitted or conditional. You're saying it does?
It does not. That's what I'm saying.
Does not?
No, so If it did meet those 5 conditions.
If it did?
If it did meet those 5 conditions, which is parking is the predominant one, all right? We would be before the planning board as a site plan. We'd be permitted by right. The Board of Adjustment hears it as a use variance. And as such, we have to demonstrate to the board that we're not being detrimental to the zoning ordinance and the master plan.
Okay, so you do need a use variance.
Yes.
You need a use variance to change what's currently there.
Correct.
To do what you want, which is to make it into residential and commercial.
Correct.
Thank you.
Except, okay, they do not have to prove that they would in other use variance cases, that the use is compatible with the zone. That's usually step 1. If I want to put a gas station on your street, wherever you live, okay, on Vincent Place, I first have to show that that use is compatible with the zone.
Okay.
Then I have to prove the other criteria.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Because the ordinance allows this mixed use at that spot,
But it doesn't.
it allows the use because it's a conditional use.
It says it doesn't allow even a conditional use.
Can I try,
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, maybe I should try and help explain it.
Maybe person to person is better than anything else
So,
to person.
at the location, it is allowed to have a professional office, which is the law office, and residential, only if it met all of the other requirements for that. And parking is one of them. That's what makes it the conditional use.
But it doesn't say that. It says it's not.
But since they do not meet all of the other requirements, then it does not meet it, and they need the conditional use variance.
Even though it says does not meet the requirements for permitted or conditional use.
That's the application you're reading? That's not really,
Oh, okay, right here.
No.
Throw that out?
Yeah, actually, because the applicant.
But that's what it says.
The applicant.
In your document you gave
I'm
me.
sorry. Okay, because technically, it does not, technically that is correct. Okay?
But why aren't we going by the technically
Because there
correct?
is a distinction, and that's what we're trying to say. Let me read to you from the focus of the board in considering a variance application of this type is not whether the proposed use is compatible with the other uses in the zone. The governing body presumably already determined that it is, as long as the deviation from the standard in the context of the total proposed development is consistent. So what this board is looking at is whether the deviation from the standard is detrimental to the public good, is consistent with the zone plan, et cetera, as the planner testifies to. But it's already deemed to be compatible because it is a conditional use.
I heard everything
Okay,
you said.
all right. I'm trying, I'm sorry.
It doesn't say it's a condition, it says it's not a conditional use. This document, which you gave me,
Right.
which says,
It fails.
per 150-17.11, conditional uses. The following conditional uses are permitted within the district, subject to area, yard, and bulk regulations.
Correct.
And other controls identified in the conditional use regulations of this chapter. This is the important sentence now. The proposed mixed residential and professional office, law office use does not meet the requirements for permitted or conditional use. Therefore, a use variance is required.
Because it does not meet the conditional.
Right.
Because it does not meet the conditions.
Yeah, so a
Okay.
use variance is required.
Correct, but they don't have to prove the traditional proofs for a use variance, okay?
Which are?
Which would be that, would have to be that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, that there.
They don't have to prove that.
They don't have to prove, there's what's called an enhanced quality of proof, okay? If it were a D1 variance, the gas station in the residential zone, okay? Because it is a conditioned use, they do not have to meet the enhanced quality of proof in this situation, because the governing body has already said, yes, professional mixed with residential on the second floor we like, provided. We're talking about the provided.
Okay.
This configuration is not permitted, the way that they present it.
Correct.
Is not permitted, right?
The
That's all I'm trying
The
to say.
configuration.
The
Okay,
mixed use is the configuration
Yeah.
that's presented.
okay.
Now you sound like a
I'm trying
lawyer
to say.
because you're getting into semantics.
I really don't put me with, I'm just trying to understand, because when I get up here and I speak about why I don't want this to happen, I want to be clear on what I'm defending.
You're doing great. And I'm not saying that to be.
No, I understand.
Right.
Thank you.
And just for the record, our rules say, conditional uses in a C2 zone, mixed residential and professional office uses, non-medical, subject to the mixed use standards set forth in section 150, which then proceeds to list 5 conditions that have to be met. They have to have an even distribution between the principal uses within the building. So residential and office have to be 50-50. Not less than 20% of the lot will be reserved for open space. So they have to have that much open space. A dense landscape buffer of not less than 15 feet has to be reserved between them and the residential properties, any adjoining residential uses. And in the C2 zone on site, the site access must be from Bluefield or Pompton Avenue, where it is. The one that they got caught on is the one that says parking for the various types of uses shall be provided in accordance with the requirements of the town.
Which is what we discussed.
That's what they're getting caught
I
on.
understand. Okay. And the first one about the 50-50, is that in adherence?
They're in compliance.
That's in compliance. Okay. Thank you.
That's, are there any other questions from the public for this witness?
Hi, Anthony Gardner, Verona. Real quick question. Where are we in the process in terms of the evaluation of this project? What are the next steps? Is there more opportunity for the public to provide input? Are you voting on this tonight? Like, where are we in the process?
As far as I can figure, we're at a point where we're taking questions for the engineer. If council has closed off their presentation, then we will offer the opportunity for public comments on it. We'll close the public comment portion and open it to board deliberation, and it's entirely possible that we could make a decision this evening.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Well said, Mr. Chairman. He could put on the public.
He could. Okay. Is there anyone else from the public who has a question of this witness? Seeing none. Council, is your presentation?
My presentation is complete. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at this time, is there anyone from the public who would like to make a statement to the board on this application? This would be the time to do that. Mr. Sarah?
Anna Fusaro, Verona. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Okay. Bear with me, please. In our residential areas, Verona needs more houses, not apartment buildings. In our residential areas, Verona needs more grass and trees, not concrete. In our residential areas, Verona needs more families, not businesses. Verona needs more backyard barbecues, not parking lots. Verona needs more children riding bikes, not traffic. I implore of you board members to stand up for keeping Verona a community of families who can live in houses with backyards and neighbors who look out for our children and pets. Keep Verona the way it is. Change is not always better. and one question that I need answered, whether you answer me this evening or another time. How does overriding the zoning rules for this project benefit me? Benefit the 3,000 plus residents of Verona? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to make a statement about this application? Seeing none, I would move to close the public portion of the meeting and open discussion to board deliberation. And in light of the hour, if we have a little organization to our discussion, that would probably help. And looking over the variances that are required, perhaps we could start with the tree replacement, removal, and et cetera, since we've never done that before.
So we're down to the E listed on the agenda.
Yeah, I started at the bottom, work our way back.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. One of the items that we didn't discuss with the tree removal was the Environmental Commission's request that we find out who cut those trees down previously and hold somebody accountable. Does anybody feel that that's pertinent to the discussion this evening?
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like it's an interesting question, but I think it's outside our jurisdiction.
Everybody's kind of in agreement about that. So what we're looking at is 14 trees down, 23 trees replaced.
Well, I believe the applicant, when I think I raised that issue initially, I believe the applicant agreed that if they, as part of the, if it was approved, that they would clean up the debris that's currently, left over from the improper removal of the trees.
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't know whether we could require any more of him since this predates his ownership of the property.
So on item E, anyone have any feelings one way or the other in favor or opposed? And maybe we could line up behind that.
I mean, I'm satisfied from the testimony that they intend to bring in the proper experts to assist with that process, and that they will abide by the requirements to replace the number of trees with the types of trees that they're supposed to. So I don't have an issue with it.
Anybody feel strongly in the other direction?
I have a strong feeling that the applicant is willing to work with any of the committees that are necessary for them to, with whom they should work, and willing to change any of the things that they've said so far.
So as far as that's concerned, approving that site plan with the tree plan as provided is acceptable to the board. I'll just go with that. Okay, we have 3 items that refer to parking. Depth of the stalls, the schedule of how many spaces there are, and whether we eliminate one for safety reasons, and the fact that the parking is proposed by our definitions to be within the rear property setback. It should be noted that in our code, it does specifically say that off-street parking space shall measure not less than 9 feet by 20 feet, exclusive of access drives and aisles, shall be of usable shape and condition. That might be where we move one. Where front overhang of the vehicle is possible onto a paved or grass area not used for vehicular or pedestrian circulation or parking, the space may be reduced to 18 feet. So the 18 feet would not be out of the question, given the fact that we have the 2 foot of grass area for an overhang.
I want to bring up two things that are kind of interrelated about all of this. One is the fact that this is a flag lot, right? There's that giant swath of land that's putting the numbers absolutely in their favor, right? But in reality, to me, anyway, I kind of see this as like two separate pieces of land. Like there's the usable one that's closer to Pompton, which from my approximation is about a little over 15,000 square feet, and then the rest of it is 18,000, right, all the way up there. So for me, I almost just see the 15,000. And that 20% that you just said is part of the conditions. I don't know the calculations because, you know, they're not on here. You briefly went over them. But that's just a consideration for me, you know, and even the 65% improved lot coverage maximum, is that actually working at that lower section there? I don't know. I can't tell. That being said, this is on the downside of a giant hill. I mean, if this were on the upside, I would have more of a problem with it. Food for thought. The other thing is the size of the additions in the architectural set. I'm kind of curious as to whether the apartments drove the increases or did the law office drive the increases. And that then also therefore implies the parking count. Anyway, this is just all stuff floating around in my head, and I'd welcome some other thoughts from you guys.
I think being short on parking and sort of a, like if the spots are full and you go all the way to the back and you realize they're full, I see getting out of there fairly difficult. I do see it like a bit of a wonkiness, like how it's all arranged with those last 2 spots if people are parked there and how you're getting in and out. I'm okay with maybe creating a little turnaround, just something like at that 24-foot mark, so that cars can at least do something to maneuver safely in there.
Especially since that driveway is on Pompton Ave. So,
Yeah.
like the car would be backing up on Pompton. It's not on the side street. That's what I'm worried about. Is, you know, if you don't know to park over on the grass, you're even making it tighter for someone to like turn around if they can, right?
And honestly, the type of use we're talking about, a law office, I think, again, based on my own personal experience, law offices don't tend to have a lot of visitor traffic. I mean, sometimes like in the case of a will signing or something like that, but that's unusual. And there's not that many attorneys on site, 2 of which are completely remote all the time. So I think actually the bulk of the parking is probably going to come from the residents.
Right, but we can't always expect it to be a law firm use, right? So in 10 years, if something were to happen and who sells the property and it's a different type of office, we have to consider that.
That's true. But I would like to, the one thing I think we can all agree on, I think I'd like to see less spots because I don't like the configuration now.
So I'm in agreement, but I also don't want to restrict it too much. And then you have a bunch of cars that are parking on Vincent Place. We don't want that either.
Don't want that.
So that's where it's kind of like in my mind, it's like a fine line, like to get a right balance. And Christie, you made a great point. We're approving the variance, or at least voting on the variance, that it's for the property. So the law office could change. I'm sure Mr. Oloya wants to be in business for, the next century, but things could change, and it could be a different professional office that requires more, either more workers or more, I would say stop-in visitors or clients.
I do think the configuration of the office is described, though, because it doesn't, from based on the testimony, it doesn't have a lot of open floor plan space, really. I mean, there's individual offices. I think that limits the types of businesses that could utilize that space. We already know there's a prohibition against medical use. I would feel like a medical office would have a lot of parking just necessitated. But like here, I just think the way it's being, I don't think another business could use it without substantially changing the internal sort of design.
Well, but they could.
They could. No,
They could.
they
And,
could.
and it's a huge space. I mean, for only 6 people, I mean, he's probably spending a lot of money on a lot of square footage that, for only 6 people. And again, potentially down the road, that could be renovated to be a lot more.
I guess I have a very simple question here. After all this back and forth about would it be before this board or before the planning board, what's depicted here is the parking space deficiencies. Am I thinking in the right direction?
Not just the parking.
Oh, yeah, but that's part of
The
it.
variances.
Okay, the variances, okay. So this is just a hypothetical, what would they need to do to eliminate, if they just scale down a portion of the project, would that eliminate a number of these variances on their own? I mean, that's what's in my head. In other words, right now, I think there were two apartments in that building.
Well, they can't because the parking is deficient. So.
Well, I mean, it's
They would have to
deficient
go
because
for
they have
20.
3, suppose they just, they put
Well, they
2
could scale
apartments.
down the.
The square footage.
There have to be new calculations.
Yes, no, I mean, we're not going to solve that problem.
And then you
tonight.
have the square footage issue,
Yeah.
because the first floor has to be equal to the second floor.
Okay.
Can I ask Mr. Helb another question? Or is he closed?
Not so close to.
No.
Okay, all right, so I'll throw this out there too. So some municipalities and some master plans have what's called transit-oriented designs. And it's basically a methodology to encourage people to take public transportation or to walk or whatever. And some municipalities will let you reduce the number of required parking spaces if you can argue that X amount of people are taking buses or ride shares or whatever it is. That was not testified to here, so I'm assuming that is not applicable. But Pompton is very much an opportunity for that to take place. And knowing, because I've read part of the master plan, that the King's Plaza might wind up being something very different one day, might help the reduction of parking spaces on this site.
Well, there's a bus stop right in front of the property.
Yes, correct.
So I mean, they certainly have access to public transit.
You have to be careful where you're going with this. You can take certain things as, quote, judicial notice, like everybody knows there's a bus stop. And the one thing about zoning boards and planning boards is that you have local knowledge. So on any appeal, deference is always made to the boards because of local knowledge. So you can use your local knowledge of which you are using, but you cannot enter your own testimony. And I'm not suggesting you're testifying, but now you're saying, well, let me carry that a step further. Had they argued this, I could have concluded this. And that's where you have to draw the line to say, well, they didn't argue that. It's not as obvious as a bus stop. They would have had to offer some proofs. Proof that it's a bus stop, everybody knows it's a bus stop, no problem. Proof that it meets criteria of a transit village or transit, whatever you called it, is totally different. So that's where you have to be careful in your deliberations of the distinction.
And how would you do that, Greg? You could maybe go to the New Jersey Transit, and could they give you information about the number of people who use the bus line?
It's too late, is my point.
No, but I'm saying,
Well, if that were the
if that were the case, yeah. No, I know you can't do it now. in order to enter that initially.
Exactly, that would be part of,
Okay.
the presentation.
Right.
that-
This
that
is
we
just for
made.
future, my future
Exactly.
edification. Okay.
Back to reality. Yeah, I mean, again, I am a fan of, I understand, we're here because of the reduction of things. I am on board with, potentially, doing something about the depth of the parking spots. I feel like parking sensors on cars today will not allow you to overhang anyway. You brought that up earlier. And spot, I mean, I guess I'm just looking at the lot, and my big concern is the first, what is it? It's 17, is it 18, 15, or is it spots 19, 18, 1, 2, 3, from a renter's perspective are not going to be, the best of spots, even though they're close to the door. You're not going to want to park right on Pompton. I think it's 1.5 spots per unit. So, I mean, I would see them like 4, 5, 6, 7 plus 19, 20. Then it's 5 plus 1. And then, I would say like maybe the first 5 are probably where, visitors to the firm park. And I feel like we have maybe like one space to work with if we're going to cut that back, because once you start painting electric vehicle on the ground and a sign, people are just going to be afraid to park there anyway, because they think there's something illegal about it. And 17's already HC. Like, I feel like we have like one spot to work with. Is that where we're going with? Is the scavenge a spot?
Yeah, basically, that's what I was thinking. I'd be okay if we remove 2 spots to potentially allow like a wider area to do some sort of.
I mean, I would just
turn
turn
it.
Again, I don't know I know that they said that they don't have like walk-ins, but I mean, to give, each attorney, one client per, I feel like you only really have like one, if I'm just doing this correctly, I feel like you only have like one spot at the tail end, 14 to like even work with. I mean, if you give each.
The numbers you'd use is that require 6 for the apartments.
Yeah, it's what,
So you've
3,
got-
4, it's 4.5, but I mean,
Right, you've got
we're
14
not gonna give them
spaces.
a, motorcycle or something.
Yeah.
And then 5 plus 1, so 6. I mean, I was just kind of counting it out here, like, the first 5, again, as a tenant, I don't know, at least I wouldn't park my car in the first 5 spots coming in off of Compton.
And to some extent, one of the things to consider here with the parking, it's a private parking lot. It's not like we're looking at, King's Lot, where we know it's going to be used by the general public. The people that are using this lot will probably become very familiar with it, for the most part. So sometimes you can approve a little tighter configuration in a lot that's going to be mostly familiar people, as opposed to taking a chance doing something like that with a store that's along Pompton Avenue or Bluefield Avenue.
Now, they may have to close their ears when I say this, but I've talked to numerous business owners like on Bloomfield Avenue. And that's, a chronic this town has chronic parking problems. It's had it and they're not going to go away. Now, they've also told me that they tell their employees never to park in the municipal lot or spaces near this business. And I don't know whether these, gentlemen would, since there is a King's parking lot about 4 feet away, you can't say that. But I'm trying to be realistic here, Greg. I know your lawyer's head is blowing up here, but this is reality.
I know where I park.
And also we've got a bunch of lawyers here. I mean, I don't think you can schedule your clientele. I think you just don't get a lot of walk-in business, correct?
Well,
Not in my line of business.
Okay.
I don't get a lot of walk-ins.
My line of business I do, just where I'm located.
Okay, you're in the right spot.
But
Yeah.
that's,
But,
And I would say, as to your point, like, picture 5 attorneys and each one has a client coming in. I think that would be an incredibly unusual situation. I mean, I just, and most lawyers honestly do most of their meetings via Zoom.
I was just going to say, do you
Let us all go.
I was going to say, do you actually see anybody in person anymore? I don't know.
No, I totally understand. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
150 square feet, you can fit 20 people for business use.
Yes.
Right? So 20 employees, whatever company you want to say, right?
An architecture
20
firm,
can fit in there.
right?
So if you have 20 employees, plus you're over.
Right. If it was an architecture
Right?
firm,
250
yep.
square feet a person.
Yeah, but I also feel as though if you, as a business owner, if you're looking to buy or rent a location, you're probably not going to choose that particular location if you're going to have 20 employees on site.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because I've had to park like in the streets of town and just walk to the office, which is like worse.
This is always the elephant in the room. I mean, that's why I brought it up. It's basically, whenever you're talking about parking in this town, that's it.
All right, well, I would be okay cutting down the spots to 18 spots on the lot. I'm fine with the 18-foot stall length as well. To Dan's point, it is a private parking lot, so that if it's tough for the tenants or the workers to maneuver around, they'll figure it out and live with it, or rent somewhere else later in the future. So I would be okay with.
Do you have a recommendation for which to go?
Yeah, the last one, 14. I believe the last one on the northeast. And then I'm up for, I could be convinced on any other spot to be removed as well.
And I am surprised that the fire official, when we got into all that talk about the width and the ability to turn around, that we got no comments from the fire department as to whether or not they would have, if there was a fire, that you needed to access that side of the building.
They would not go into that part. They would not go
And I
into that part.
suspect that they have plenty of access on either side, because there are two streets right next to, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have. And I'm assuming they would have mentioned it if they didn't have access and this was going to be a problem.
They'd be too close to burning structure to do anything. They would have some.
May I, Mr. Chairman, I have seen approvals where parking is reserved a spot for delivery only.
Yeah.
And then, pick a spot close to the door and make it delivery only. And then, that kind of I think it would alleviate your concern about somebody, a UPS truck going all the way to the end and not being able to turn. So if you said there were two, you're going to get rid of one and then designate one of the closest to Compton Avenue as delivery only. That gives you your FedEx and your UPS. And, your Uber Eats. But that's certainly possible if that's what you're inclined to do.
Do we have the ability, and I'm just curious, not just for this application, do we have the ability to condition approval on limiting how many residential spots can be offered? Via a lease agreement?
Yes.
And that would run with the
Yes, and that would have to be a condition that someone would have to monitor. The landlord would have to agree to it, to say, fine, my residents are only going to be able to park in 1 through 4, and that would be in his leases.
Yeah.
And then, but you could do that, yes.
But I just wonder if that's a way to alleviate some of the concern, because if we can define exactly how many spots would be available for purposes of the residential component, then we know exactly how many spots are available for all the professional reason. I don't. It may not be desirable, and
The other thing you could do along those lines is limit the number of occupants in the residential units, which again, the landlord would have to do in his leases, no more than 3 people over 17, and he might not want to do that, but, then generally 14-year-olds don't have cars.
I lived in lots of apartments over the years where, you could only have one car to live there.
Right.
That was just sort of.
Well, that was one of the concerns that somebody from the public brought up about the, number of occupants in the when they were actually being utilized as apartments. He seemed to imply that they were, occasions when there were large numbers of people, occupying the two apartments that were there. And to your point, limiting the number of people, I think would be, if we could do that, would be a good idea,
And street parking overnight is
not allowed there.
illegal in
It's
Verona.
not
So
allowed.
it's not like someone could
No.
try to avoid that. by-
They could, let's put it this way, you have to call it in to the police department. And they only give you 3 a month, from what I understand. So I don't think that would be a problem.
You can pay for on-street parking permits.
Yeah.
Are they available on all streets or only certain streets?
There's 5 of them on my street. I'm on a dead end.
Then maybe that's not a great solution.
And they usually do that to accommodate not just single-family homes, it's blocks maybe where you have, 2-family homes or small apartment buildings.
And did some residential homes don't have any driveway? I mean, I know in Montclair, some houses have no driveway.
No,
They
that's,
have nowhere to park.
so they, from a practical standpoint, the overnight permit parking is allowed, but I don't see that, not that I know every street in the town, but I don't think that's I don't think it's out of control.
So from a summary point of view, from where we left with Scott, Scott's accepting of 18 spaces, eliminating space number 14 in the back, and council has suggested that one of the spaces in the front be designated for deliveries. It would still give them 19 spaces on the plan as far as we're concerned, but it would be 1 space in the front for delivery. And the possibility that we should limit the number of residents or the number of,
I was just spitballing. I was just
Okay.
trying to come up with a
tell me,
potential
can only have
solution.
7 employees, don't even think about growing?
Well, could he just designate spots for resident parking? Is that within his purview?
You said that already.
He
That was
did, he
part of
would.
the application,
Okay.
right? Which spots were residents?
Well, spots on Vincent Place were for
Those are
residential
designated.
only because that's a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
I hold issue with that, though. I just think practically speaking, they're going to cut across your lawn. They're going to go around the front there. Oh, yeah. Yep. 100%.
On that note, we did that because we thought that that would be a benefit. But when I think through it rationally, you're better off having me park there on a regular basis because I'm
Yeah.
only there Monday through Friday and it's not in and out. It's once and then I leave and I'm not there Saturdays, weekends, holidays.
And
the
you have
residents-
access right
a
there.
resident, I think, goes out more than a professional who comes to work and then leaves at night. So if the board does not want to make that a requirement, I'm more than happy to make it our spots, meaning, I'll park there, whatever, whoever.
I think that's what we brought up earlier. That's why, I had almost seen 19 and 20 because there was a paved walkway with those side steps. And if I remember from the architectural design, those actually led into like partner offices or something to that extent. Like, I think it almost made more sense to have those just be dedicated to partner offices and then have the residents. I think we had I know every application is different, but I think we had previous examples where the more complicated spots were for residents dedicated there so that we didn't, you didn't leave that to the general public or, to the business end. And then we had the more complicated spaces to the residents because they would have more familiar knowledge. And I know every application is different. I get it, but.
And let's face it, you really don't want the residents walking past your 2 conference rooms.
Or walking across the grass.
Okay, so we can do with 19 spaces, 1 required to be for deliveries, eliminate the space in the back so we kind of have, in essence, for turning around, a K-turn spot. And
Yeah, I think for 18, like just, 30-minute offloading or whatever, just like deliveries, just 30-minute onload, offload, whatever.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's going to be a total then of 18 spaces?
there'll be a total of 19 spaces, 1 dedicated for
Okay, so there were 21,
deliveries.
I'm sorry.
There were 20. And we eliminated number 14
Okay.
for the turnaround.
Okay, 19 spaces, of which one will
Of
be-
which one.
Gotcha. Right, okay.
This is the room where it happens. Okay. Limits, just, I heard that we were okay with the 18-foot, with the hangover, so to speak. And essentially, that's the spot for the parking. Now, by either definition, it's in the rear yard. So we accept that?
In terms of whether a variance is required? Is that what you're
Well-
asking, whether it's in the rear yard or not?
Yeah, no, I decided it's in the rear yard.
Oh, you did, okay. Great.
I
Hold
decided
on
it
a
was in the
second.
rear yard, but
Hold on a second.
a variance is,
Is the parking considered an accessory structure in a rear yard then, which then has limits
Yes.
of whatever it is in the rear yard, 30% of the rear yard? So that's a different variance.
Yes, that's what Kathleen had said in the beginning was required as a variance. Mr. Held has offered his opinion otherwise. I concur with Kathleen. I think it's a matter now of, you've already, I think, accepted the layout and have modified it somewhat, so I think now it's semantics. But that's the chairman's call, not mine.
well, it does say in the rules, it's from the line to the building. So the discussion here is a parking lot a building?
So the definition of accessory, I'm sorry. There's a very specific language that's in the code.
There's rear yard, there's limits to the amount of accessory structures you can have in a rear yard. Right, Kathleen? And there's also the setback of an accessory structure in the rear yard, not a setback from the principal building, but from an accessory structure in a rear yard.
I think it might say accessory building. I think that's what it is. There's something very specific in there. Can I see it?
Okay. I can give you this first yellow tab covering parking and setbacks. Still look at this.
Like a pool. Just like a pool. A pool is an accessory structure in a rear yard, and we have a setback requirement of a pool in a rear yard.
Well, in this case, it's much bigger and harder on the skin.
And it's irrelevant at this point.
Yeah.
It's hard on the skin.
Well, I was just going to say, well, as semantics, we're looking for whether or not we specify the variance, and that's why we hired counsel.
I would say on abundance of caution, vote on it as a variance.
Okay, given all those changes, and there's nobody to explain it to, the use variance is kind of like fixed.
Well, just how, like, what's the review process now? Okay, we're saying, okay, let's eliminate a spot. The eliminated spot could still be, like, a wonky situation, like what recourse do we have for, like, if we say this and we're wrong?
Well, they're violating the terms of the resolution and would be subject to the wrath of Kathleen.
No, like, we say, okay, you eliminated a spot and whatever, so, yeah.
Right.
Let's say it's done, like, it's still,
Hey,
okay.
you made a bad decision, but it runs with the land.
Just one of the things I've been looking to do is have a follow-up review on some of our approvals, where after we approve it, we actually go out 2 years later and see what happened, like those two big buildings on Bluefield Avenue. Their parking garage is minuscule, and the cars are parked on top of each other. Just see how that works out. So, yeah, if we were to do something and it didn't work, that's how you find out.
Mr. Chairman, and also, in all seriousness, Kathleen had pointed out a pre-existing non-conforming, that Code Section 150-17.11D, minimum lot width is 100 feet, existing and proposed on Pompton is 172, but Vincent is 92.25. So that's existing. The applicant is not proposing any modification, but I think if this were going to be approved, the board should endorse that non-conforming so that it's memorialized and then runs, in perpetuity.
Okay. How are we doing?
I found it, but it's not applicable to this situation. It's actually under lot coverage. It says that portion of a lot which is occupied by buildings and accessory buildings, not accessory structures. So that's not this.
Probably a typo.
We loads and loads.
So did Jim. And in all seriousness, we never did the final edit. They published that before. I still have changes that were supposed to go to edit on my versions, and they never, right? They published that when we didn't finalize it.
Okay. So, are we at a point?
I just want to memorialize something, just to be sympathetic to Miss whoever.
Memorialize or memorial?
Memorialize. The member of the public, Anna was her name. So everybody left, and maybe she'll be listening to the recording or something, but just to be sympathetic to her, I completely agree with her sentiments, in that Verona should be a town that fits her description. Unfortunately, I think this area is already so developed, and it's hard to get a really developed area butting up against a residential area in a realistically scaled and appropriate way. And I think this project does that pretty well. It's a nice transition between the two.
I think we all agree. I think we all agree with her sentiment. And it would be nice to have it, but somebody 11 years ago came up with the fact that that should be a C2 zone. And it's, that's the direction they want to take it in. And the apartments are.
Nobody's going to put a single-family residential home on that lot. I'm sorry, because it's so close to Pompton Avenue.
Right.
I mean, it's just not going to,
Look what they did in Essex Fells with that line of like.
Well, wasn't that for affordable housing?
Yeah.
They did that to accommodate affordable housing. That's a totally, let's not get into it for another 3 hours.
I would agree. This is probably the best configuration that we could permit in this particular location. Speaking of that, are we going to permit it?
I will make a motion to approve this application with the conditions that Dan will state.
Oh, boy.
And Mr. Chairman, there's one more that Ms. Murphy Braddock had brought up about the size of the condensers. Was that going to be a condition, or was the answer satisfactory, or that they could not be seen from the street? Or you're satisfied that it's not a condition? And
I was satisfied.
Okay, all right.
I doubt they'll be able to be seen from the street.
Great, okay, then I would.
And the condition was that the condensers were going to be put in compliance with.
Right, that's
College code.
pretty.
Okay. Condition of soil disturbance since 2004, check into that and comply with it. Quantify.
I would like to hear from our engineer, if she has any conditions that we think should be covered.
That was hers. That was hers.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. I listen
No,
to
is that her own?
I don't listen to her all the time. But,
No, I think the two major ones that I can think of right now is the OPRA request that we should probably have it, and the tree removal plan, the finalized tree removal plan with the quantities.
the quantities for each of the species of tree. I had it. I was getting to it. and the applicant agreed to commit to all of the Boswell recommendations. I guess at this point, I would include the, who else was it? It was the building department.
That was tongue in cheek, that was pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Anybody else?
that's understood anyway. And
You're
the
going to comply with
environmental- I
the
think
recommendations.
The environmental commission, but that's really was,
I see the trees and
the trees and the impervious, but
Impervious
it's going to be a system that's satisfactory to Boswell. So Jim, your numbers will verify the numbers and then.
Okay. It did.
It's on here.
There's going to be that one out in front, and they're not going to light the one on the
Not
building,
hideous.
right?
Is that the condition? Not hideous.
It's gonna fit in with how nice the rest of this looks.
It's a bust of Brian. Fingers lit up, pointing.
Well, it's a complying, it's a monument sign in compliance, so.
Right, okay.
Okay, let's not leave Christie hanging. Christie made a motion, and there were several conditions attached to it.
Second,
Thank you, Scott. Okay. Madam Secretary, may we call the roll?
Dr. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
yes, with the conditions.
Mrs. Murphy Braddix,
Yes.
Mr. Mathewson,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBartolo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Weston,
Yes.
Chair McGinley.
Yes. By my count, that motion also passed unanimously, a rare night for us. We will prepare a resolution document, and it'll be available at our next meeting.
Great, thank you everyone for your time.
Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, is there any reason to go into executive session?
No, I'll make a motion to dismiss.
Motion to adjourn, 11:07, approved. We need everybody for the next meeting.
We looked over the roster.
What did they actually have there? We're gonna make you do this for a while. What did they
Just
actually
sent to the office.
have?
Yeah, no, there's a difference, which
Oh.
you may not be aware
All
of.
the time.
It was 70%. And they were fighting to make it, like, they were fighting to lower it to 50.
Everybody.
Yeah, which,
Yes.
I thought it was kind of a break.
In principle.